What is going on, everybody? This is SCP CRMP, aka Lack of Lepers, and I want to welcome you to an odd date, slightly odd time, not much, of the week in Collapsible, where we take a look at every single SCP Wiki article that was posted successfully this week. And excuse the ad. And so we are going to look at those. I do have some help tonight. We should be joined by the one, the only, Harmony, to kind of help out with a little bit of these articles. Because quite honestly, gang, there's just too many of them. And only a crazy person would try to do all those by themselves for a very long time. And I'm not that crazy, believe it or not. So want to apologize for today. We were supposed to do SCP Meta, which is our like 1 hour call-in talk show. And just for logistical reasons, we weren't able to do that. I appreciate people having sort of a loose flexibility when it comes to this channel. I mean, most of the views that we get here are not really participatory. They're sort of ex post facto. So I think that's okay. But, you know, we're going to have to roll with a lot of things. My life's been crazy lately. I'm dying to get some regularity back in to the mix. So that'll be part of that. But I do appreciate, you know, accommodation of the schedule. And so, having said that, we'll move forward. This is going to be from this last week, starting on, I think it is the 16th and the 17th, and going through this Thursday, which is the 23rd. And I would like to welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Here we are, the one, the only, Harmony.
I just almost pulled my whole thing over here with my
Okay.
headphones.
Yeah, you got it back right in time. That was clutch. What is going on? How you doing?
I'm doing super well. I actually have 8 instead of 9 here today because it turns out the last one that I had, I actually don't know how I can access it because you need to have an account that's not banned to be able to
Really?
do it. That's also a member. Yeah,
This is a
because
S.
the adults only thing is that you have to have a site membership. So I can't go incognito mode to like get around it because I don't have
Oh
a site
wow.
membership to log
That,
in that's not
wow.
banned.
That's the one part where they got us. We've been able to, bypass all of their
Yeah.
hey, but I guess we can't read their adult
You
smut.
know what? If you don't want me to read it that
Yeah,
badly,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Let's hope
I'm
they don't
not
catch
gonna
on.
fight you on that.
Yeah, because I mean, all they'd have to do is just
So
have adult tags for everything. We would never be able to read anything anymore.
yeah, so 6681 Project Serapis. I don't know what that one's about, but it gets an F tier because it's unreadable.
All right, technically,
Actually, literally unreadable.
literally. All right. Well, let's kind of dive in here. Let me get this window share in here.
Hang
So
on,
I do
I
want to
actually
introduce.
want to bring another light over here because I
Yeah,
feel
just
like this light right in my face kind of hurts my
yeah.
face.
I hear you. Hey, I
One
hear you.
sec.
Yes, sensitivity to the eyes. So while Harmony's fixing that, I'll just kind of look at what we're going to be working with today. So it looks as though we start on the 17th of June, and we go to the 23rd. So this was a pretty busy week. Quite a lot going on here. So I really appreciate the help. Obviously, very 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 appreciated.
Whew.
And
Okay,
so what
I think
we
I've
do,
made my lighting situation a little bit cooler.
yeah,
I've cooled off
yeah,
a
I see it.
little bit.
See it. You got a little more there, but it looks good. I like the angle this week, and everything looks very
Yeah.
tidy.
Yeah, I'm trying. Let me turn my fan off here. That's right next to you. That probably help the audio a little bit. Yeah, I've been trying to do. I'm trying to figure out what's the best configuration to have all my lights and my board because I found that I really do enjoy making stuff with the board. I don't know if you saw my holders TikTok that I made earlier today. I'm really enjoying the whiteboard TikToks. They're fun. They're quick to make and they're fun to do.
Yeah, and it looks good. It's just a great way to do it. So
Yeah, I'm stealing a format from a YouTuber I watch who does it. He does daily hockey content with his boards. He writes
oh,
down
nice, nice.
meticulous notes
Yeah,
on everything.
and
I'm
that's
just
a really
like,
great
ooh,
analogy here because we're kind of like sportscasters in a way. Like we're sort of sideline commentating upon all this. It's almost like a sport.
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
It's got a little competitive angle to it.
that's right. Brought to you by Lepers in Harmony.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get into this, and this week we did split up by days. Harmony, how would you like to do this tonight? Once again, I'll acquiesce to what you'd like to do. We can cover all of yours at once, or we can skip, and sort of hip hop around there.
Um, I'm good with whichever. I want to get all mine. I can knock it all mine. I've got my notes here ready to go. I just refreshed myself on them when I wrote. I read them before, but I read them right before I write the notes so that I have like the freshest possible thing in
Right.
my brain to be able to get it down with. So I have 7 written reviews and 1 that I just drew a picture because I didn't think that I needed to say anything else.
Well, hey,
So
it says 1,000 words, right?
yeah, exactly.
Sometimes words fail. Like if an article is that good or that bad, sometimes a doodle.
Well, this one, it was a joke article, but it's just the whole article is just a King of the Hill reference. So I just drew the
Oh,
pocket sand meme with a mobile task force guy.
that must be 1997J. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay, well,
propane.
let's start
Propane.
there.
It's
Let's check
sure.
that out.
So this article is just the whole joke is that it's like a Hale type character, but he's pro pain, like he's pro inflicting pain,
Oh,
but like with a
oh.
salesperson type motif to it.
Like a propane salesman, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a propane, like PRO-PAIN
Yeah,
propane salesman.
yeah. Okay, so it's a little bit of one of those pun articles. Nothing wrong with that, right?
There's a lot of pun. I'm gonna warn you straight up front. I don't know about you, but for mine, there's a lot of puns this week.
Oh, really? Yeah, I
A
think
lot of puns this week.
I don't know if I paid attention, but this, hey, I mean, there's a lot of puns all the time. It seems to be kind of a trendy thing to do nowadays, I guess. All right, so we got what's the joke? Is it just that pun, or is there more to it?
That's pretty much the only thing I got out of it was it was King of the Hill references all the way down.
Oh, okay.
There's a character named like Gribble who kind of acts like Dale Gribble from the show,
Mm.
and he has interactions with this guy who gets mad at him and he wants to inflict pain on him because he's pro pain, and it kind of just made me want to watch King of the Hill. I'm like, this is just making me want to actually wish there was more King of the Hill content for me to enjoy, because I've seen the show 10,000 100 million times.
It's like kind of a catch-22. It's like, oh yeah, it reminds me of that good show, but now I just want to watch that good show instead of reading, I guess, this.
Yeah, it's almost like referential humor is kind of shallow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so what does the 1997 have anything to do with anything? Does it?
I'm assuming that's the year the show started.
Okay. Well, let's take a look.
I'm pretty sure that's the year the show first started coming out.
Began in what year? Bust out the search engines. You are correct.
Yes.
1997. You win. You win.
Oh man, I know a thing or two about King of the Hill. I'll tell you what.
Right. Well, so does that lead you to enjoy this article, or what do you think? What is your
so I think it's fine. It's not really for me, but it's a joke article, so you can be subjective. But good news, I just found an earring that I had lost on the ground. I just saw it sparkling from the light that I set up.
Let's hold up the screen there. I'll maximize you real quick. Nice. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Glad you found it. That's always
me too. I like that earring.
It's troubles. I wrote a joke article. It was an SCP one time, and it's this thaumaturgical process where if you drop something and then you sort of like use your hands to comb the immediate area in concentric circles, it causes whatever you drop to demanifest. No pocket dimensions. That's my little haha.
I like that.
All right, so something else we're doing. Excuse me, I was trying not to cough. Something else we're doing this week. I thought this would kind of be a nice way to sort of say a lot of things, kind of like your doodle. If we don't get a chance to share everything we want to say, just for time constraints, I'm an old, coot and a Luddite, and so this is kind of new to me, honestly. But this I thought was, trendy, obviously. But I also thought this would come in handy. So what we've done here is created a tier list for the SCPs.
Yay!
We have all of them down here. And for example, here's SCP-1997J. And so the tiers that we'll be placing every single article in this week are as follows. The top, which is the best, even though it's in red, I'm confused, says weightlifting the whole SCP Wiki. Weightlifting the standards, the whole thing. The next one down is Array of Hope. Okay. And then the middle tier is meh. It's pretty expected. And then the lower tiers, the worst ones, are so bad I didn't finish it, which I think, unfortunately we come across from time to time reading these articles. And then the last one is actively lowering the bar. So if it's just that bad, if it's not even innocuously bad, it's like actively hurting the wiki.
Repellent.
Yeah. What is that's where you put that one. So where would you say?
Solidly in meh.
Solidly in meh.
A solid meh. It has meh and meh-like properties.
Yeah, and I bet you what we're gonna get here is a pretty pretty stout bell curve distribution where meh is by far, the most populated, and we'll probably get a few up and down, along the way. So
yeah, I think we're probably gonna see a lot of meh here. All right, so there's propane is out of the way.
Okay.
And then the next one can also be dispensed with quickly because it's lowering the bar. It's actively lowering the bar, and it's the whole thing. It's a great premise, wasted because it's used only for the purpose of executing the pun. It's a diving horse that can magically dive, and the pun is Horse Jesus diving for your sins.
What's the number here?
The number is 6867. Lucky Bucky, the incredible, miraculous diving horse.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so it's not a J. This is played straight.
Played straight. Unfortunately, if it was a J, I would put it at solid meh. But it's played straight. I put it actively lowering the bar. I did not like this one. I thought it was shallow and dumb, and I was like, you did this whole thing just for a pun.
Do we want to see who the author is, or should we just let it go?
I don't even. Yeah, I never look at the author because I can't even see the page history anymore. So even if they're like pushing it front, I'm very oblivious. Yeah. But I'll see if I recognize the name, because I bet 9 out of 10 times I'm gonna have absolutely no fucking clue who the writer is.
Dodo Devil is the name.
Yeah, never heard of him.
Yeah, I've actually read a few of their works that I really thought were excellent. So I gotta give credit where credit is due. Hey, hit or miss, but hey. Okay,
Yeah, it
so
could be that I'm just being lame and this is actually hilarious, but I found it to be dumb.
yeah.
I didn't like it at all.
So this is SCP-6867. Let me try to find that here. I do wish I had a better way to catch these. It does seem like that the author at least found an image, probably built the SCP kind of old school style from that image.
Yeah, I was excited for a diving because I know the diving horses were a real thing for a while, and I was like, ooh, diving horse SCP. That's an interesting historical anecdote to be drawing from. And then it was like, I'm just like, why does it have to be like everything Jesus? Horse Jesus, milk Jesus. Enough.
Yeah.
Not everything needs to be Jesus.
Yeah, poor Jesus, really getting ragged on.
I know.
Not sure what he did to these people, but so you put this on the very lowest, actively lowering the bar. You'd
Yeah,
say.
I don't know. Maybe there's something else to be found, but I found it as soon as it devolved into becoming just a justification for a pun. I lost all respect for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. It's sad what these authors will turn the foundation, the character of the foundation itself into, in order to enact these sorts of really sad, really degrading documents that if you found in a database would be kind of strange to be there.
I agree.
Yeah. So that must be what you mean by actively making it worse, because unfortunately,
yeah. It doesn't. It completely takes me. It's unimmersive. It takes me out of the experience of like, ooh, I'm in this secret organization containing shit.
Which of course has varying degrees of engagement. You don't have to be so strict all the time, but the equivalent that I would say this is like is if you were watching a show and they caught a blooper, because this is really a performance art, right? Config.
Yeah.
Config is a performance art,
Yeah, you're being rated. You're being measured and judged by your peers.
Yeah, and part of the art is to try to do what every art does, which is to remain convincing in its own standards. So, like for a TV show, obviously that means that the actors need to be acting. They need to be in their character, and if they break that, then that's kind of a technicality. That's kind of a technical failure of the show. So these to me are almost like if a character broke their character and it was sort of like a blooper, but they left it in the show because they thought that it maybe get some laughs or something.
It's a Saturday Night Live sketch that's gone on for 2 minutes too long.
Yeah, although I do love those skits when they can't help but laugh. That's an interesting analogy. All right.
Yeah, when they start corpsing, very funny.
All right. So 6867 is obviously, this is a highly mimetic article, we would say. So it's got the popularity and the success, but maybe when it comes to, the more academic writing, endeavors for the site, sounds like this is actively promoting lower standards for the wiki.
All right. And the next one, actually, you're from the premise. I'm gonna tell you the premise, and then you're gonna tell me whether I liked it or not. Okay.
All right. Is this 6681?
This is 63. This is 63. 97 now.
All right. You'll have to keep up what you've gone through.
Yeah. 6681 is uncategorizable because I had no access to it.
Oh, this is the one.
Yeah, this is the one that I couldn't get in there. Hey, can you? Is that no? Okay. That's a different one.
No, this is 6681.
That's 60. No, it's 6593.
Oh, okay.
That's the fucking Charlie Chaplin one. We'll get to him.
Okay. We'll just jump around the days. All right. So one more time.
No, this is June. This is June. We just did June 18th. We're on June 20th now.
Yeah, there's one from that 6681 is from the 18th. You want to go ahead and hit that one?
No, that's the one that I can't. That's the one I can't. That's the one that I couldn't see.
Oh.
This one is no. Is it the Charlie Chaplin? No, it's not the Charlie Chaplin one.
The 6681 is from the 18th of June. It's Charlie Chaplin.
Oh god, then I got the numbers mixed up. Then, but that's probably fine then.
All right.
Okay, the Charlie Chaplin one, I just did not. I was just like, oh, it's just Charlie. It's Charlie Chaplin, but what if Charlie Chaplin was an SCP?
Yeah.
It's got some other elements thrown in there, but ultimately that's what it boiled down to, and I couldn't really get into it from that because I'm just like, when it's just take a real life story structure and then append anomalous stuff onto that to make it kind of different. I lose interest because I think I know too much of the real history where I just find it to be incredibly unrealistic and simplistic.
Yeah, that's probably a weakness you have to struggle with.
God, I know.
Too much.
The burden of being a big smarty pants.
Exactly. So it looks like this person has the ability to regenerate from bodily damage. Has an enhanced immune system and the ability to go comfortably for weeks or months without sleep.
It's Super Chaplain.
Yeah, super chap. So this is kind of a Mary Sue chap.
The super tramp.
Yeah, yeah. And okay,
Super
well,
tramp.
it's like a decent length here. We got logs. Yeah. So what do you think about this one? Just on the whole, let's put it in our categories.
I think it's a solid. It's a solid. What's the one above meh?
That one is Array of Hope.
I would say, just because I didn't like it personally, but I feel like others might like it if they weren't picking holes in it in their head the whole time that they were reading it. Because it has some interesting stuff, especially by the end. It actually gets pretty good in terms of like the actual story that they're going for.
Huh.
It gets kind of there's stuff going on. It's not lazy. It's not lazy.
Good.
It's ahistorical, but it's not lazy.
Well, that's
at
nice
least
to
in
hear.
terms of the actual storytelling going on. So I'd put it slightly just a little above meh, because otherwise I feel like if I just said it was meh, I would be being unfair based on my own personal proclivities.
Well, that's very kind of you, and that's
I don't like it, but I don't think that makes it bad.
So it's nice to hear that, because the first thing I think of is when I see somebody basically just take something straight from reality and make it an SCP and find a way to kind of pigeonhole it into an article. Usually I worry about it being lazy, but it sounds as though the author really...
It's like the horses were lazy. The horses were an example of it being done lazily, but it was actually done pretty well here. Okay,
well, should we see who the author is?
Let's check it out. Let's see if I recognize the name. Drum roll. Right.
Oh, I think you recognize this name.
Who's that? Who's it?
Stan Honey.
Oh,
yeah.
I should have known. I should have. In my head, I was like, this.
Yeah,
that checks out. All right.
Good job, Stan Honey's been on a tear lately. Like we were talking about to staff.
He gets hot. When he gets hot, he's very hot.
And he does it around.
He'll go on a tear.
Yeah, he'll do it like right before, like it's like he's warming up, getting all cylinders firing. So watch out.
Yeah, he's true. He's the real writer bot. Like I have writer bot tendencies, but he has surpassed me.
Yeah,
and I love to see it.
Been putting out some good work too. So this sounds like it's one of them, and so we recommend this one, SCP-6681. All right, so you lead me now. Let's go to wherever you want to go next.
I want to tell you about the one 6397. I still want to tell you. I'm going to tell you the premise, and you're going to tell me if you. Okay, so it's like a golden retriever tentacle monster creature, right? And it's like a dog, and they make it part of a dog furry mobile task force.
Oh my. Okay, so my task is to try to figure out whether you like this, just based on
the premise alone.
Rudimentary premise. I'm gonna say a big fat no.
No, I fucking loved it, dude. It was fucking great.
Shit. All right, good. Well, good. So this is our
because it commits to the bit. See, the problem that I have with wacky and wild articles is never that they're wild and wacky. It's always that they fail to commit to the bit, because they come up with this great buck wild premise, and then they don't like really follow through on the idea. But this one, you can see like they go through some lengths to actually show you how this furry, they give it its own logo. It's actually going out there. They have like field operation logs out there.
Nice.
Like it's quite elaborate for what it is, but it's also not like,
oh, man.
Yeah, see?
There's some deep stuff in here. I'm going to read this line. Just happened to come across it. You've lost your way, little one. Working with your jailer does not set your people free. Oof.
Yeah, right? Like, it's kind of hits hard.
Yeah, it's almost like that, like ancestor dog would be ashamed to see where domestic dogs are now kind of thing.
And it's also, kind of got, you could look at it with all the modern struggles going on. You could read a lot into that line.
Yeah,
and there's a lot like that throughout. It's really like it doesn't take its goofy premise as permission to not actually try.
Mm-hmm.
It's not coasting on, wow, this is wacky and novel and weird and silly.
And look at me flail my arms on the screen. Yeah, so I'm actually kind of seeing a little bit of the sophistication you're talking about here, just from a high level overpass, because we got 3 Portlands, which is always an interesting,
love me some 3 ports. Love me some 3 ports.
Excellent. And then it looks as though this person had a nice, education on the history of the wiki, because we see Kane Pathos Crow show up here. The avatar of Kane Pepper.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what I'm saying. Furry dog, furry mobile task force, but it's actually kind of awesome.
I hope it's led by. I hope like Kane Pathos Crow is kind of like the command equivalent of this task force.
I'm not telling you shit. You got to read it yourself.
All right. Well, I'm happy to hear that. You know, this one, the rating. You know, maybe I was looking at that a little too much. It doesn't seem to be very well appreciated, unfortunately. Where would you put
I would put that as the top tier. That's excellent.
Okay, so this is weightlifting the.
Yeah, this is showing people you can be silly and still try.
Awesome. And so you said that the dog has like tentacles, but
yeah,
but
it also looks like a dog, and they have to like talk about it. Like they're like, you look like a dog, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's funny. And it looks like nice, healthy cross links here. Like this dog is going into SCP-3560, which I don't know this one. Not that we should get too detailed on these cross links, but yeah, so just nice looking article too. You got to give it that. So let's see who the author is, huh?
Let's check it out.
Ah, Ruskeed. A Good Girl is the name.
Ruskeed. Good title. I don't know who that is.
Ruskeed is someone who I see a lot writing very good comments on articles, on poster articles. So someone who would be a star in that staff team that never does anything, never continuously involved.
As soon as it started being for work and stopped being for fun, they would immediately burn out, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
that's how it goes.
I mean, if you weren't here, I'd be done, by the way.
Yeah.
So, can't blame them. But yeah, Ruskeed has some really good commentary, very good critter, very good critic, very good analyst, for SCP. So it's nice to see a work by them, and it's nice to see you appreciate it. That's good. I'm rooting for Ruskeed. I like Ruskeed a lot.
Yeah, that was they made a cool one. Like I really honestly, when I saw that it was like a dog and it had like a mobile task force attached, I was ready for it to be like
me too
atrocious.
Yeah,
and then I was like,
it got
what is going on?
What a good girl. What a good girl. All right,
a good girl.
Cool. All right. Well, so good. I'm happy to hear that. Despite popular belief, I like it when we come across really good articles. So, all right, where are we going next?
The next one was 6347 Ular Barong.
Now, I'm gonna say the one in between on the 20th is 6593. Is that the one? I can't keep track of which one you couldn't see because of the adult.
Yeah, I think so. I got a little mixed up. It's called Only Cans.
Yeah, you're right.
So
you're right.
I'm gonna say that I just don't. Did you get past it? Did it let you in?
No, I'm not even signed in. Yeah, no, that's yeah. That must be a I don't know. So were you signed in when you tried to get in?
Yeah, I was signed into my account. It said you need a wiki account to do it.
Interesting.
I wonder if they've got me. I wonder if they've got me like super IP banned because I'm at the same IP address that I was at when I.
That's interesting.
Got popped there.
Well, this one is real short, so it's by Plague PJP. So I mean,
good picture.
Disclosure. Yeah, really cool picture.
So is it, what is it? Is it soda cans that fuck or something?
Let's see. A standard vending machine, candy bars, pretzels, beverages. It's sapient, capable of English. I kind of get the feeling that this must be a pun.
It's the vending machine from the beginning of Maximum Overdrive.
Of what now?
You ever seen that movie? It's a Stephen King movie, Maximum Overdrive. It's about Maximum Overdrive. The opening scene has a vending machine that calls Stephen King an asshole.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Yeah, it's literally Stephen King, the director, who also directed the movie, is there, and he tries to buy a soda, and the machine calls him an asshole, and he says, "This machine just called me an asshole," and then the machine shoots the soda and hits him in the nuts. And that's how they start the movie.
It looks as though... Go ahead.
And I just want to say one more thing, that Stephen King was on an ungodly amount of cocaine while he was shooting that movie.
Really?
And it shows.
My gosh, dude.
Fucking great movie. It's a fucking great movie. It's a terrible movie, but it's a great movie.
So I wish that's what this article was about, but just reading through, because basically it just has a brief little setup here, just saying that we have, a sapient vending machine that can talk. And so, of course, we have our event transcript where we have a transcript log. And it looks as though the whole thing, it kind of does what that doorknob Jay does with the knob, but instead it kind of does this with the vending machine where we have lines like this. Yeah, look through my glass. I'm such a dirty slut, showing you what's inside of me. moaning loudly. It kind of just
Weak
is.
sauce.
Yeah, it seems like a very, very thin.
Juvenile. Very juvenile, weak sauce.
Well, once again, the author tells us who they are right away. That's kind of, my full disclosure is that I kind of try to expect these things when I see this author.
So that's some shit that not even National Lampoon. That would have been in like Mad Magazine.
Yeah. What I've been saying lately is that a lot of these jokes that don't pass for like decent jokes, they're kind of like on the level of like newspaper, like Saturday morning newspaper comic jokes that like would be laughed out of most. Yeah.
It's a Hagar the Horrible strip.
Yeah, or Marmaduke. Like
Family Circus.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the level of this stuff that I get. Obviously, this one's a little more adult themed.
Dilbert tier humor.
Yeah. So those people they made a career out of it, I guess. So all right. So SCP-6593. Where do you feel? This might not be the fairest of placements, but just so that we can.
I'm gonna throw it in meh because I didn't even know I could read it until 3 seconds ago. So
that's fair.
Can't fairly square it any other way, but
that's fair.
I think that meh seems like a very fair categorization for how it's been described here.
Sometimes the title is really great. So let's just see. This one says only cans, and that's a pun on OnlyFans.
Okay, there you go. You get meh because only cans and only fans.
Nice pun. It kind of feels like that's where the idea came from, but that's okay too.
That's the whole reason this article exists. You know what? What's the one below meh? What's the one below?
I agree with you.
Let's move it down one. Let's move it down one. I can't. I'm trying to be nice and good conscience, but I can't. It's not. Clearly, obviously. Look at that shit. That is some fried trash.
I didn't want to finish it. I'll tell you that. After I read the first few, and you kind of get it after one line. I mean, it's basically done.
Yeah, that's the joke.
Haha. Okay, so I think we are now at SCP-6347.
Yeah, it's Ular Barong.
What is that word?
It's kind of like an Evil Dead Necronomicon type book. It's a novel with like exactly 222,000 words in it, and if you read talk about it's one of it's magic object that knowing about and talking about and interacting with the magic object makes Evil Dead type shit. Bad thing. Sam Raimi type shit start happening.
Okay.
It's got the main meat of it. There's a log that reads like it's a parody of, specifically to me at least, as a person who's been following like the angry video game nerd James Rolfe and his whole Cinemassacre project. It's specifically like a parody of that whole group and their aesthetic. So for me, actually, it was very thin, but also all that was there I kind of liked. The interview is at least you got through it and things happened by the end. I would put it in meh, but it's like a meh.
Okay.
Like an upward inflection meh.
Yeah, a little bit of an optimism to that.
Nothing really that great, but nothing really that bad either. It's alright. It's alright.
Yeah, I glanced a little bit. I'm not sure the clinical tone here. The movie hugely flopped. Yeah, that kind of seems like it's fumbled.
But you know me, clinical tone. I don't really give a shit. I don't really give a shit.
I hear you. Yeah, it's nice to have a different view there. Let's see who the author is. If my page will load. It looks like this one is decently appreciated at +11. This kind of reminds me of like Morbus. Kind of like
Morbius.
Yes, which I don't know anything about. I just it's impossible to stay away from it.
Yeah, I think that's what they were going for. I think that's kind of it was kind of like a, I don't know. There's some kind of a meme, I think, lurking in the background here, but I didn't really get it in the forefront of the article.
I hear you. All right. So I was trying to figure out who the author is, but my computer has decided to not load that. So
I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, I hope the page isn't down. Cold Nights is the name of the author here. Cold Nights.
Cold Nights.
A new SCP I wrote at 2 a.m. while listening to French folklore music. Stumbled upon the name by chance. Was weirdly fascinated by the term. It's a lovely name of a snake. Sounded mystic and ominous. With
It
the-
is
with
a
the-
really excellent name.
yeah, absolutely. Good names for snakes on the SCP Wiki. And
Yeah.
Anashika is a great name for a
I
snake.
agree. They're Ouroboros. There's this
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
They're going from strength to strength in terms of specifically naming snake characters.
Yeah, utilizing milk, and naming snakes. That's two things that the SCP does very good.
Solid
Very good.
choices.
So, would you say that this read like a mystic and ominous article? Would you say?
Yeah, I think that it would have been much better if they'd leaned into it more. It was kind of skimpy on those details, but what was there I liked. So I can't really. I wanted more, but I can't say that wanting more is always a bad thing.
Now, I do want to look at just a couple things. Sword Lover 87 is someone who also consistently says something on these articles, and I appreciate their work. So, thought it was bizarre. There was sort of a dream logic present, quite hints at something strange. A little too heavy. It feels like it's leaning a little too heavy on the surrealism, and kind of marred my enjoyment. But overall, an upvote.
Yeah, that's what I meant, like by the Sam Raimi type shit, not like the violent grotesqueness of Evil Dead, but the abstract strangeness of like you're going first person through a dark and spooky woods with a 15 frame per second shutter, and it's all foggy and mysterious.
Yeah, and we got this is a nice page. We've got Random Day, who obviously is a very talented author, but who has excellent crit when Random Day shows up to say something. Always good for a look. And then Lord is someone else who I think is a very good critic. So y'all check these comments out too. All right, we already rated that one as meh, I think. That's correct. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Moving on. Where are we going next?
Next one is Worlds Within Worlds Within Worlds. 6547.
6547. Here we are. All right.
Also, I have to note it was nice this week. It was 9 articles, so it lined up nicely on my my
it
board
is.
here.
Little 3-3.
Yeah, I got a little grid going.
Yeah, I like that. This one looks like it's by to Staffer again. So the streak continues. I think last week I counted it was 4 last week, and so I guess this is 1 so far this week. But damn.
It's a pretty good one. I liked it. I thought it did the bare minimum with the idea, but the idea that it had, it's like a recreation of a person who works at the foundation. It's a little diorama of their life, and it changes based on what they're doing at any given time. It reminded me of like those crime scene dioramas that they used to make to recreate, try to figure out how murders happened and stuff like that.
You're talking about connecting this to this to that to this.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't really get. That's just what it reminded me. I don't think the article is not really going for that. It's more like the main themes to me seem to be the consternation of this guy not really liking that this thing is peeping on his life, basically.
I see.
But
what's up with this box?
I can identify with that.
It kind of reminds me of like Metal Gear Solid, like hiding in a box.
Yeah, that's kind of I got that vibe. That's what I thought it was gonna be like. Then it ended up being more like a diorama type thing, if I'm understanding it correctly.
All right. This is interesting that the description starts out with the -1. Usually we have the actual designation and we're introduced to it, but it looks like they just kick it off. So that's bold. Obviously, this author knows what they're doing. This is not just
Yeah, this is someone who's been around the block a couple times.
Yeah, these are very conscious decisions. So that's an interesting little touch. But it looks like it's a cardboard box, which when opened reveals a near identical miniaturized replica of the room that whatever room that this is kept in. Which is interesting because I immediately wonder what happens if you have it outside as it is in this picture. I wonder what happens then.
True. Plot hole.
It kind of reminds me of what was that, Dr. Gear's anomaly that like expands any room that you put it into, and basically
the architect.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I can't remember the number, but that kind of reminds me of this.
It's 5. I think it's 591 or something.
Sounds right. All right, so what would you say just overall for this one? 6.5.
It's all right. What's above meh?
Above meh is a ray of hope.
A ray of hope. Yeah, I'll call it a ray of hope. It had enough good to it than bad that it feels like it's a step in the right direction.
All right. Well, wow. So congratulations to Staffer. Still haven't asked this individual what the porridge thing means, but by now it's clear that this is supposed to be here.
Okay. What is no? We need to know what the fuck is going on with the porridge.
I know. I'm kind of timid to ask. I kind of just want the.
I'm dying from curiosity though.
I wonder. I just do you think it has an explanation period? I guess that's where we can start.
I want to know if even a lack of an explanation on purpose would still be an explanation enough for me to be satisfied.
At least it's not a typo that just has gone unnoticed.
That's true. Yeah, because I know that the first time we saw it, we were very consternated by it. But now it's a welcome thing. Because usually the article is good if there's a porridge thing.
Oh look, it's Porridge Man.
Yeah. The porridge man has brought us some nice warm porridge.
Yeah, and this has been a well-received article at 51 for this week. So that's a very healthy rating.
Gold blocks on the Three Bears type beat.
Yes, exactly. Porridge. I mean, gosh, when was the last time I had porridge? I don't know. Okay, well, very, very good. So this sounds like a recommendation and gets a little ray of hope there. So that's nice to see. Check it out, 6547 by to Stafford. Did you happen to get the name of this one? I've been forgetting to.
Of which one? The 6781 or 6547?
We'll just say this one.
65. Yeah, that's worlds within worlds within worlds within
worlds.
worlds.
You say that. My bad. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, then, that's what it's called.
Very recursive kind of.
Worlds within worlds within was.
Oh, look! Someone asks about the porridge. Look.
Oh yes, please.
If I may, why the porridge? And then there's just an evil smile. Let's go back and see. Yeah, I was even hoping that there would be like a revision.
Okay, we need to ask them. We need to be like, yo, we've been doing it. We need to tell them that we've been like doing this week. Send them like clips of us talking about it week in, week out to let them know like the full depth of our curiosity.
Well, it really, whatever it is, I mean, clearly it's some sort of marketing, effort, and it's working because
I can't stop talking about it. I'm still talking about it.
Porridge is.
Why are we still?
It's just room temp. It's been sitting there for so long.
Why are we still talking about porridge? Oh my god!
You got us. But anyway, so Lord says this one.
We got straight T Stafford.
Short fun read, horrific implications. Fits nicely into the fridge logic brain teaser genre of modern SCPs. Not one for the aged, but enjoyable all the same. So it sounds like that's kind of where you put this too. Ray of hope.
Yeah, solid.
Nothing stellar, but good, but above average. All right, so that's SCP-6547. Check it out. Where are we going next?
The next one is 6781, Site 7 Heritage, which unless I'm missing something, this feels like they started writing the article and then didn't finish it properly.
Oh, okay. Well, tell.
Because unless there's some like little hidden collapsible somewhere that I'm missing, this is literally just the setup. It's all set up and no payoff. It's a setup of we've got this underground cave where we keep all the records and the important stuff because it's not affected by time anomalies and shit. And it's got a stable reality here. And it's like, cool, so what are you going to do with that? Nothing at all. The premise is all you get.
Interesting. Okay, so let's see. So it's a cave system of indeterminate depth, resistance to reality shifting phenomena. It's Thaumiel, so it's doing some kind of utility.
Yeah, it's just where they keep stuff.
Yeah.
It's like boring. Was that it? That's boring.
Oh, I can't believe it. It's just that, huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it's nothing to it. Like it starts and then it's got all this like extra setup. It's all pomp and circumstance, and then it's like a guy boasting and bragging about how long he's gonna last in bed, and then you take him and he's done in less than a minute.
He's that minute man.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's really disappointing. Where would you put this?
I'm saying. Like this is trash tier, bottom.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so 81.
No mercy for this bullshit.
Actively lowering the bar, huh?
Yeah, did not enjoy that one.
81. This seems to be like it's co-written. Let's kind of look in here and just see if we can get a little bit. Oh well, it's by Rounder House. That's probably explains the upvotes. Thank you to my
disappointing.
Oh, Fishish is. I hate to say that. One of my least favorite authors in this site. And Stephen Lynch. So it's nice to see Steph Lynch back because sometimes Steph Lynch decided to leave and delete all of the articles. So it's nice to see.
To be so lucky.
Yeah. I will say that Roundhouse has thanked the alpha readers, Plague PJP, and then also Stormbreath, and then shouted out one article by Stormbreath that I am just a giant fan of, that we went into probably a 20 or 30-minute praise session over for probably 3 weeks ago, something like that. All right, let's see what we have here. So this is inspired by 2 different real facilities. The first is Iron Mountain's Butler. Handles secure containment and destruction for most major companies. Turned into a vault. I want to say there's got to be something else here, because Rounder House is, I mean, say what you want about Rounder House, but there's got to be something.
Someone was just calling me on the telephone, but
oh, that's okay. I was blabbing.
It's all good.
All right, so this is very intriguing. I'll say that, because once again, the reception is very high. It was written by someone who we typically would deem a competent writer. I'm talking about Rounder House.
Yeah, and, he can write, but he's not trying here. This is just very weak, tepid, bad.
Okay. Well, I hate it, but that's what it is. It looks like we got a nice little. I mean, obviously, it looks flashy. So
it's just a piece. It's just a piece of crap with diamond studs.
Yeah. All right. So 6871. Unfortunately, that populated our bottom tier. So. Boo, but read that if you want.
I think I know what I'm being called about. I'm being called about it's the Stanley Cup Finals night, and people want me to go.
Oh well, let's finish you up so you can.
Let's finish these. I've got one left here. So
okay,
and the last one I have is pretty dope sauce. So this will be a good one to go out on.
Okay.
This is his toolbox grew hands.
Oh,
this is one that the description is so muddled. Like, if you look at the description, Lepers, you will see that this description is muddled as all hell. It is kind of really hard to understand what the fuck is going on. But then once it gets into the logs, it starts getting pretty good. Because it's this weird inanimate object hybrid that it's like a toolbox. It's like it's got a lot of functionality to it. And then the end interview is very. This object has a very philosophical approach to itself, and it's kind of reminds me of like it's a Swiss Army Yoda.
Oh, there you go.
This is a Swiss Army Yoda.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, I immediately see what you're talking about. There's like this grab bag of different chimeral additions from various animals all over the place. So it's very surprising you're telling me that the author, by the end of this, actually finds a good use for this, because most of the time I feel is when people do this approach to an anomaly, it's basically just kind of like artist fodder, almost like they want somebody to draw this thing badly. But it sounds like the author found some way to use this and put
it comes together by the end, because it's got like it's got thoughts about what it would mean to be this kind of like this malleable entity that is becoming a hammer to hit different kinds of nails.
I see. There's a line from the anomaly that says, "I was his toolbox, a catalyst to channel his vision through." Seems to be like a germinal focus of the article there. Maybe a catchphrase there. Catch line.
That'd be a good byword for it. Or byphrase for it. It's really it's quite nice, because the description starts off pretty rough, but by this point in the article, I was really digging it by the end.
Well, that's cool, because once again, like any bad idea, somebody can do a good job with it. Somebody can take it in that right direction and show that you can actually get somewhere with this.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say this one gets a little ray of hope, because even though I think that it doesn't work more than it works, the parts of it that work make it good enough to outshine those.
Cool. All right, so let's shout out the author here. Give him a little love. Crowcat.
Good job, Crowcat.
Yeah, I think this is like one of their second articles. It was just a few weeks ago, I think, that they had posted one that was their first. So,
I know that I don't know if you're still doing it, but if you want to give me a list of some authors to message about us talking about their stuff, I would totally take an hour of my data to go through and mess people up now.
It's funny you say that. I kind of stopped doing that like as of 2 weeks ago, just because obviously that was a marketing thing, and I felt like at some point I don't want to come across like desperate. If people want to watch it, they will. But if you would be willing to do that, then yeah,
definitely.
That sounds great.
I have no shame. I'll fucking message anyone I want.
It's fine with me. I did it for like a month or so.
If you just give me a list, I'll let people know. Hey, we talked about your thing today. If you want to check it out,
good. They may like that. I think probably in there's a little bit of a guilty pleasure people like to see.
Yeah, everyone likes to know when their stuff's being talked about.
All right. Well, good, good. Well, thank you once again. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that.
All
We've
right,
got a nice little
I
spread
would
here.
next time I want to stay longer on the show, but it's Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah.
It could make someone could win all the
Don't worry.
simoleons tonight.
You do what you. So is your team?
My team got eliminated in the second round, but the team that eliminated them are themselves on the brink of elimination. So I'm hoping that they lose.
Oh, okay. All right. Little payback
So we
there.
will see. Yeah, so I'll let you know. I'll let you know next time. Next time I'm on how that
All right.
goes.
Well, we'll do that next week. How's that sound for you?
That sounds perfect. I'm
All
looking
right.
forward to it.
Harmony, I can't thank you enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Take it easy. All right. So that's awesome. I just love the help. You know, like I started back my new not my new, but I started back my full-time job a couple weeks ago, and it's just been so difficult to do this. I was doing this when I was on paternity leave, you know, so I had all the time in the world, kind of. But yeah, it's just so helpful to have somebody come and help, and so I really appreciate Harmony. Just, you know, one of the most tenured minds in the space coming back and helping us with these articles. So, having said that, now we'll take it into my gear, which is usually takes a little longer, but we'll try to get through the rest of them. I took the 16th, I believe. So sorry, the 17th is where we start. So we'll check out SCP-6554. Look at all this. I'm not sure why it does that. It takes a while to load. I'm not sure it looks great. All right, so let's kind of see what this is. So this is an anomaly affecting approximately 53% of ethnic Chinese persons currently residing in the mainland Republic of China, born on the 4th of every year. The article goes on to tell us that they are disfigured. They have some sort of physical ailments that happen as a result of this small percentage affliction. And goes on to do some interesting things with it. It's not long, as you see, and we have some these addendas are exploration logs, essentially, where we have an MFT who comes to where this anomaly is sort of pointing to, and does some research and does some exploration. And we have some lines here. This is in Chinese, but it does provide the translations, of course. And this is not a translation article. This is legit English wiki post. So yeah, I think that let's go to our tier here just to kind of get to the bottom line quickly. This is SCP-6544. I'm going to firmly put this in the meh. I think this is kind of an average article. There's somewhat of a build here to the narrative and to the escalation and the ingredients that the author is working with. But I think it probably would have played out a little better if we actually did have an exploration log here. So that's not something I usually say. Usually I'm happy to see an author basically synopsize the exploration log and save us all of those lines of dialogue that can be a little trite, you know, a little dry, a little boring. But in this case, I feel like it needed to have that because it really otherwise is just a little too removed, a little too dry. I thought it needed some color, needed some atmosphere in order to deliver itself well. So that's, you know, once again, not something that I would usually say, but this is an art, and you have to, I think, know when to do things and when to go against, you know, your guidelines to make something good happen. I think this is one of those moments where that would have been good. Another thing about this article that kept it average to me was that things seem to happen very conveniently. So, for example, there's this person who meets the mobile task force as soon as they show up and tells them exactly what they're looking for is like right below. And I think, yeah, it's right here, this footnote 2. Basically, as soon as the MFT arrives for the exploration, this thing sort of manifests, and it's almost like plot convenience. It's almost like it's just there because the plot demanded that someone tell this MTF where to go. And so it comes across as very, very contrived and very convenient for this to immediately be what the MTF is greeted with, so that they can, you know, have the actual exploration log that they may not have gotten were it not for this person showing up. And then there's also a lot of middle ground that I think the article skips over to establish, basically in the span of a sentence, that the deformities of these individuals that are born with these deformities create some sort of cryptological cipher that points towards these coordinates that you see here. And so all of this, like, is in one addendum. It's analysis of the injuries. And like I said, basically in the span of a sentence, we get this. Let me just read it. Analysis of the injuries being these deformities and disfigurations. Analysis of the injuries by the cryptologists of the Foundation have revealed that the three-dimensional spatial orientation of anomalous injuries in the subjects is correlated with a cipher that reveals the following coordinates. As it just seems like it's incredibly packed. It needs to be unpacked just a little bit. There's a huge amount of middle ground that needs, I think, probably a little more explanation as to why that is the case. How is it, for example, what does it mean by the three-dimensional spatial orientation of the anomalous injuries? And how is it that they correlate to it? What cipher? What is this thing? And how does it reveal that it points to coordinates that are the coordinates that these MTF people just so happen to need to go to in order to figure out the rest of the anomaly? I mean, this just seems, it's not clear at all how this could be determined, and it just feels very, very densely packed to the point of a little bit of negligence when it comes to the detail, to the pace, to the story, to the logic of what's being talked about here. So it just feels very, very rushed, I guess, in one way to put it. The article does focus on some numerology. You see like 13 platform, 4 is just repeated over and over again until it sort of reduces itself to just saying the number 4 over and over again. And we lose the MTF to the anomaly, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but once again, just contributes to the overall feeling of this being kind of an average article, I would say. That loss of the MTF is only gestured towards in very ambiguous and muted ways. It never really achieves any viscerality to the creepiness or to the presence of whatever it is that took this MTF. So, it does end pretty quickly after that. So all in all, I think this is a pretty low energy article. It feels like it's sort of a going through the motions kind of read. I don't know if the author just was bored with their own idea and wanted to kind of get it over with quickly, or if the author didn't really understand, the places where to add some flourish, to add a little artistry, when it comes to the scene construction or the characterization or the action. So, Yasi Posse found it very, very creepy. Really enjoyed the suspenseful build-up and the thematic elements surrounding the article. Even if I didn't catch a lot of the symbolism and the history was new to me. Fantastic work. I hope you keep producing articles. So I was actually going there to find the author. This is Balaki, I guess is how you say that. So, once again, this is firmly, in my opinion, as I put it here, in the meh category. It's not great. It certainly isn't bad. This is a competently written article. I just think that it really missed out on all the opportunities that it gave to itself to make something more of itself than just sort of a forgettable read, honestly. So that's that. That's SCP-6544. Moving on, we have SCP-6127. Listen to this music, huh? Oh, baby. I feel like I'm reading Plague PJP's Only Cans. Yeah. Okay, so what is this? SCP-6127. This is an adult female raven of average size and weight. Despite its initially unremarkable appearance, which is a phrase that should never exist, by the way, in an SCP article, because obviously nothing is as it seems, but it wouldn't be here if it were just an unremarkably appearing crow. That's really the least interesting part about what we could be talking about here. And so I think that this is it's one of those things that doesn't really think about why it is there. You could simply just start the sentence here. Although this article would run into another problem that it's having, which is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but that it does start every sentence, except this one that I just mentioned, oddly, with the SCP. So anytime you have this where almost every sentence really is starting with that one, at least in the description, as far as the description is concerned, that's just another indication that the author is not paying very close attention, very close artful sort of detail and attention to the composition here. And those things can really affect the pacing and really bog the read down and make it feel like a slog to get through. So, I would put this one probably pretty meh. for a lot of the reasons that we've already talked about, there's some technical errors that are happening here that I think hold the article back. But more than that, I think this article doesn't really reach out far enough in the creative realm. So this is just, again, something that we see all the time on the SCP Wiki, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that we see it all the time, right? But another talking animal, that's sapient, that's able to have a conversation with the Foundation, and has numerous interviews to that end. Is just a dime a dozen. We get at least one of these a week, I feel. And so, yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's just a hard thing to make this sort of direction, to start with this sort of, color palette here. It's very difficult to make this, really, really good, because there's so many of these that basically just all do the same thing. Where there's this talking animal, and the Foundation talks to it, and it's able to answer all of its questions, and it really, gives a lot of information about itself that it wouldn't be able to do if it were not sapient. And then by the end, it sort of tells the Foundation something about it that we as the readers didn't initially know. And that's basically it. That's kind of the blueprint for 95% of these types of articles that decide to take a talking animal and run with it. Okay. So this time, this bird is able to speak all languages. So there's a little bit of a curve there, a little bit of a spin to the idea that isn't always there. But once again, it's kind of a lackluster spin. It's certainly not very imaginative of an anomalous treatment, and just feels like it's just trying to buttress itself with some just barely consequential traits. Because I mean, it's nice that it can speak all languages, but obviously we're probably only going to get one language in these interviews. So what use is it if it can speak all languages? Not sure, functionally speaking. So, all in all, I think this is a pretty uninteresting anomaly. It's an emotionally sterile of a character in this anomaly, the actual Raven, with no real engaging features. And then as we get into the interview, it really speaks rather robotically. Like I said, it doesn't really have a lot of character emotion. It seems very, very almost programmed of a response, where it's just this question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. There's not a lot of organic qualities to the discussion here. It seems very claustrophobic, and doesn't know how to take a breath and stop and smell roses and things like this. It's clear by the end of the first interview that obviously we're reading these interviews because the author wants to push through a backstory for this crow, and that the bird is somehow the embodiment of someone who has fallen from some sort of spiritual height, that kind of has a Luciferian sort of characterality to it. But the attempted mystery and intrigue of this is not well baked, I think, and gives itself away very too quickly and surely to be effective. And so it's just a little too much exposition. Once again, this is a problem when you have an anomalous animal that can speak. I mean, it's almost this, magnetism sort of chute, as opposed to a ladder that just automatically drives it down to, I'm going to be reading a highly expositive interview, that tells me backstory and everything, that needs to be here in order to make this, something. Okay. So the emotional arc of the anomaly, particularly with respect to the designated researcher here, Dr. Tyler, is pretty uninspired, with the anomaly getting irrationally upset at the researcher eventually for not protecting it. So something that happens action-wise here is that as they learn about this anomaly, the crow, they decide needs to be transferred to a different site that specializes in, things that are like this crow. Okay. And so when the message gets to this crow via Dr. Tyler that they need to be transferred to another site, the reaction that we get is that, first of all, this SCP can tell that something's going on, and is so clairvoyantly piercing into the character of this Dr. Tyler after 2 meetings, that it can pull out, once again, as if convenience, as if sheer plot convenience can pull out, set the stage for what this, this character interaction really wants to do. And so the reaction here is this: you told me you were here to protect me. How is moving me far away, the only thing that is going to help me? How does it keep me safe? And then it goes on to get really angry. You lied to me, Dr. Tyler. I see you can take it in your face. So this is just sort of a character who it's almost very childish of a character, and it kind of feels like the sort of reaction that doesn't really meet the reader anywhere interesting. It just seems as though it's kind of getting mad for the sake of some sort of emotional spice, but it doesn't really have any substance to it. It's sort of just there almost for its own sake. So that's what I mean when I say the emotional arc of the anomaly, particularly with respect to this Dr. Tyler character here, is uninspired. It's irrationally upset at the researcher for not protecting it when this is probably the right thing to do for the anomaly. It just is too immature emotionally or intellectually to see that, which makes for a very boring character in this crow. The rest of the interaction here is very basic. It's kind of like Foundation 101 stuff that we get treated with at the first interviews, kind of like, who are you? What is this thing that you work for? What does the Foundation do? Et cetera, et cetera. Sort of like hand-holding through basic primers of the Foundation that, once again, it just doesn't have any levity to it. It doesn't have any height, any depth, creatively speaking. It just is sort of, the most basic and most trotted of pathways when it comes to this sort of setup. So I think the anomaly is trite. I think it's given a trite treatment. It's got a trite sense of direction. There's no real standout qualities that make the anomaly interesting here, and nothing really keeps this article in the mind past really the last punctuation mark on the page. It's kind of where thinking about this article ends, exactly when it does, which is never a good sign. The end reveal here is supposed to mean something. Obviously, the SCP somehow finds a way to write this Dr. Tyler a message, which I won't spoil, but it's supposed to be a little informative by giving you a name that we can associate with this crow and that has some sort of backstory, but it seems pretty obscure. It certainly seems like the kind of thing that you would need to already know about in order for the ending to make any sense. So, I think I did finish reading this article, so I can't say that it's so bad that I didn't finish it, and I don't think it's actively lowering the bar. I mean, the best and worst thing you can say about this article is that it's just remarkably pedestrian. It's just remarkably average, with nothing really going on here that sets it apart or anything. So it's going to be purely in the meh for me. And that's SCP-6127, and the author has told us who they are at the bottom here, when I might have otherwise spared them from being associated with a lukewarm review, but it's Synth Panda, so we already see that. So let's go into here. At least this author finally got around to writing a skip about an animal, so it's respectable. I think that the author is trying to do something with what is a very difficult ingredient to work with. I feel like it could be fleshed out more, some time between the two to strengthen that bond, which is a great point. I think it's almost non-existent. And once again, if a little bird is going to get mad at you for trying to do what's right by it, according to Foundation protocol, it doesn't seem like you guys have a very meaningful relationship as it is. So yeah, I mean, it's not long. So if you have the time, I mean, there is a little length here if you look at the sidebar, but a lot of that is interview, which has a lot of spacing in it, so it's not really that dense. Do I recommend this read? I really don't. I don't think you're going to get a lot from it. But if you're into casually reading, then there's no reason to skip it. It's certainly not terrible. Shouldn't make you mad or anything. Can't say that about every article that we're going to get to this week. Okay. How are we doing on time? An hour, a little over an hour. That's awesome. I really hope you all appreciate the different voices and styles that, something what Harmony brings to the table. Obviously, it's very different from mine. I kind of like that. It's almost like a little, not to toot our own horn or anything, but it's almost like just a little bit of complimentary, Lennon and McCartney kind of set up there, very different styles that somehow mesh. Okay, so moving on, SCP-6742. Let's take a look at what this one is doing. All right. So this is a very short article. Look how concise this thing is. Yeah, so this is the second article. So I just want to point this out. This is something that I didn't understand, and I had to look this up. So this is something that I've been seeing quite a lot of recently, which is to say that there's an object class with the object class is anomalous, which is kind of a truism. It's almost completely uninformative. Of course, it's anomalous. That's why it's here, I guess. But it turns out that this is technically this is an esoteric object class, and what's happening here is that this thing, whatever it is, was so mundane as to basically be just an anomalous item that was listed somewhere, and that's why we have this. It's crossed out, and this pending is sort of like it's the same device that authors use when they do this with any other object class. Usually we see it as safe, and then we see it as Euclid or Keter, indicating some sort of escalation when it comes to action and plot and reveal that we're going to get to. And this is just really the same thing. It's just taking it down a degree, an order of magnitude, where it starts out as this highly almost flippant thing that's just barely anomalous and not worth giving a designation number to, and then that has changed by the time we're reading this documentation, obviously, which is what this pending means. So I wanted to mention that just because I didn't really understand what that was. I had to look into that and get a little help from somebody explaining that to me. But that does mean that there is a technically right and wrong way to use this. This is the technically right way to use it, which is to say, anytime you see anomalous as the object class, it should be struck through, right? Because otherwise, the definition of it, if you go on the SCP Wiki, let's actually do that together, just so that I'm not esoteric classes, just so I can kind of bring this point out to you. Clearly, you might already know this. Where is it? Anomalous? Maybe it's not here. Maybe it's somewhere else. Yeah, it must be somewhere else. Anyway, just take my word for it. But basically, this anomalous designation as an esoteric class means that it's not really significant enough to have its own designation number. So obviously, this needs to be struck through by the time we get to this page, right? So when you see an article that does this object class anomalous and doesn't have it struck through or modified in a certain way, as far as how I'm reading this, that is a technical error where the author has not thought about that well. So it's good to see that in this case, this is used technically well. I just wanted to take a moment to bring out a good use of it, because we'll see other instances where it's not used technically, in the right way. Is a technical error. So anyway, what's going on in this one? SCP-6742, very, very short article. It's a very, it really does hug very faithfully and convincingly to this having once been simply an anomalous item that didn't really have enough substance to it in order to be a designation. It's a black and white photograph of a human male. It has some qualities to it. Basically, if it is viewed by a Foundation employee, it has a certain effect on just Foundation employees, and then we get a very slight discovery and just a very, very slight update, and obviously that's where we are with this struck through and this pending. So it's a very, very brief article. It kind of plays around with the conceptual basis of ubiquitous gaze, and you know what this is, even if you don't know the phrase that describes it. But ubiquitous gaze. I can never spell on command when I have an audience. I just can't spell. Ubiquitous gaze, also referred to as pursuing eyes, is an art term for the effect created by certain portraits, which give the impression that the individual in the painting is always looking at you no matter where you are in the room. Okay, so that's ubiquitous gaze. That's the name that's given to it. And so this article sort of plays around with that idea. We've all experienced that before, so I think it's a nice entry point into the article that the author does a good job with. But there's, it almost hugs that, anomalous item sort of thing a little too closely. It's really hard to read into how this is anomalous, honestly, for me. It's a photo which selectively displays the ubiquitous gaze. For some people, it seems like that effect happens, and for others, it seems like it does not. And so, is that an anomalous quality? Like, I don't really know. And the rest of it, it sort of tacks on, some sort of cause and effect to that differentiation of who gets the effect and who doesn't. But just because it's such a slim anomaly up front, it's really hard to epistemologically and logically justify from a position of having to know this or that definitively, as you would be if you're in the Foundation. that these things are actually being caused by this ubiquitous gaze effect. It's not clear at all that enough thought has been given into the progression of what this article is trying to get across, in its effect. So it just seems, in other words, to be highly subjective of a determination. And after having read it a few times and looked at some of the explanations and discussion, I'm still not really sure how that is true. There's a story here that's kind of sketched out in abstract lines, basically in the discovery and in the update, about an individual gaining the trust of the Foundation by use of this photo, up to and including promotion to the O5 Council. But the article doesn't really have answers for why this one person was able to do that when the photo is supposed to affect a lot of people in the Foundation. I guess unless we assume that this is almost like a get to the O5 command free card, of a picture, and I guess that's what the article is. But it's it's clear to me that the author has felt or believed that they've introduced enough for an intriguing mystery, but is dangerously skirting, I think, close to not enough being here at all. It's almost like a Department of Unreality, which is sort of the MO of that style of article, where the framing of it is barely real, and what carries the ambiguity and fragility of the concepts in Department of Unreality articles is that there's something interesting in there, and it's obviously interesting. So in this whole sort of nebulous mix of half-formed action and idea, there is this one focal point that kind of intrigues you. I think this article lacks that. Maybe that's why it's not a Department of Unreality article. But on the other hand, it's really, I think, the Department of Unreality article is such a delicate construct, it's such a delicate manifestation of this art form that you really do need that one structural focal point to kind of tie everything together. Otherwise, you kind of get a half-baked idea and an article that doesn't really feel like it's telling you anything. And that's kind of the vibe that I get from this article. It's like going to a fancy restaurant and getting that one bite of a dish that they think is going to blow your mind. And even if it is, it's just like, okay, I just paid $100 to walk out of this restaurant hungry, so that's, there's something to be said. You can be as artisan as you like, but there should be some satiety there. You should be able to be satiated. So personally, I think the article is filled mostly with empty space, mostly with air. So where do I put it? This is SCP 6742. Let me try to find that here. Here it is. I think it's meh. Obviously, it's too short to not finish, so that's a benefit that it has going for it. I certainly don't think it's actively lowering the bar. There are certainly some interesting things about this article. It's very clear that the author here has a pretty good command of abstract lines that suggest things without actually getting to it. I think it's a rather weak abstract line arrangement. So yeah, I think meh is probably the best place to put this. So, all right, there's that one, SCP-6742. Let's see if there's actually any interesting. Fishish, I think, is the author as opposed to just the first person to comment. Fishish, obviously, I'm not a big fan of, unfortunately. But I think Fishish did invent the Department of Unreality, so you got to give that to them. That was pretty cool. And it's easy to tell that this person certainly knows their way around sort of a nebula constellation of an idea, sort of a deconstructed idea. It's like an idea that if you took the idea and you put a grenade into its chest cavity and it blew up and you came across it sometime later, that's kind of what these articles feel like. So don't know if I want to read any of this. People seem to like it. Obviously, it's got a pretty healthy rating for a week. So. I feel pretty ambiguous about this article. It's nothing that I'm going to want to read ever again a second time for any reason, despite the mystery and despite what intrigue is here. But I certainly wouldn't say that this is a bad article. So, just kind of in the middle. So SCP-6742. It is short, so check it out. All right, the next one, still on the 17th of June. This is SCP-6207. This one, right out of the bat, is we're told who the author is, so let's do a full disclosure because I try to be as professional as I can be when I do these reviews. And so because the individual has denied this an opportunity to be assessed in a blind scientific manner, or as scientific as we can get here, what we'll have to do is do a full disclosure, and I have to tell you my relationship with Sword Lover, because it's obviously now part of the assessment of the article, because here it is. So what's my relationship with Sword Lover 87? I don't have a relationship with Sword Lover 87. They don't know that I exist, which is fine. I do appreciate Sword Lover 87 as a critic. They often show up in the comments. I think we've already seen it on this show a few times. So I generally have favorable views of Sword Lover's commentary on articles. I generally think it's a pretty good job of analysis and crit. So I highly appreciate Sword Lover 87 for that reason. 87 is also my birth year, so that's, you know, just a little bit there. But that's really it. I know that Sword Lover has done a few articles that we've read recently. I don't really have any that stick out in my mind. There was that one co-author write with, I think it was Western, about SpongeBob that I thought was particularly bad. But that's both the good and the bad of a co-authorship, is that you can't really take all of the blame. So we'll let Sword Lover skip that by. Was Sword Lover also the one who wrote Into the Depths of the Earth? Let me look at one thing real quick. I'm going to go on a little bit of a detour, because I do want to give Sword Lover 87 some credit if they wrote this. There was one article recently. Let's just see. Center. Yeah, Hold of the Center of the Earth. That's it. Was this written by Sword? It was. This is a fantastic article. SCP-6615 is so good, in my opinion. So good. In fact, somebody asked me to create a curated list of articles that I would recommend, starting from, I think it was series 4 on, and this was one I gave them from this series. It's just way better than the rating would indicate. This is an excellent article. So anyway, all that to say, you know, Sword Lover, certainly, you know, I'm rooting for them, certainly like their work on the whole. But what do we think about this one, SCP-6207? This is a really interesting anomaly. It's a stationary office chair of unknown make and model, yada. There's basically a large pile of assorted clothes draped over the object. Removing articles of clothes doesn't alter the size. It looks like it generates new clothing through unknown means to replace any lost articles of clothing. And then any article of clothing brought within 10 meters of it is seized by a chitinous multi-jointed appendage, which kind of gives you sort of insectoid vibes, that emerges from the anomaly's inner layers. This appendage will lengthen to pursue clothing even after it is taken outside of its initial radius of effect, and has been recorded to quite a length. Collected clothes can then be incorporated into the outermost layer. So I think this is just a really interesting picture. It's a very clear picture, very concentrated, very aware imagery that understands what it is and what it's trying to convey, and so just leaves automatically and very quickly the reader with a very unique image of this kind of tandem duo anomaly picture of this chair, and then this sort of pseudo veil made of just mundane things. You'd see this chair everywhere, wouldn't you? You'd see this in your house when you throw your clothes around. And this like very foreboding, very unsettling, very large, you know, very substantial sort of arachnoid or insectoid sort of presence that's sort of here. And the author does something very subtly that I think is just so cool. Instead of just coming out and describing this chitinous multi-jointed appendage that is likely connected to a larger insectoid sort of thing as sort of a -1, or sort of introducing it as a description and then saying this is what it does, the author instead keeps this just no sub-designations, just SCP-6207, as if it's indifferentiable from the actual chair itself. They're just one thing, and then describes the hidden component of this anomaly, really the crux of the concern, you know, of the engaging part of this anomaly. They sort of keep that contained in the actual unit of this anomaly, and go about it just by description of effect. So in other words, the author just decides to describe what happens just by action, and what happens when you do this, as opposed to address the actual thing, you know, as a physical thing in there, and try to describe that a little bit too. So we get a really description of this thing that is really very, very good show and don't tell, where we basically kind of outline it as you would if you're understanding something from a functional standpoint, like you just, basically defining something as it is a tool, what it does, what effect does it have on the world, what does it do when you throw it up against a wall. That's kind of the way that this author is achieving this sort of very, sort of very appealing way of introducing a lot of intrigue when it comes to this anomaly. So I just thought that was a really, really cool point, really, really cool, slight subtle move that you don't see all the time. So, we get a little bit of a discovery, and then we get a little bit of a cadence when it comes to an addendum where the author puts in some action that sort of ties some of these components that they've been working on through this article together. It's a short article, so I think it's competently written. This is average clinical tone, nothing jaw-dropping, but no mistakes. I didn't see any typos in here, so that's nice to see. I think on the whole, the article effectively casts this arachnoid or insectoid sort of creepiness with once again this very routine and mundane sort of idea, this just chair that has some clothes on it. So once again, great job of showing and not telling us everything. Most of the article, basically the meat of it, is obviously the discovery and the addendum. Most of this works to establish hints and setting of this character, and it's skillful where it includes what to do, where it wants to do this at what time of the article it decides to do this. At the end, I think, is where the article suffers just a little bit and keeps this from being really, really good, in my opinion. It's a little heavy-handed with this handwritten note that we get from this, what is otherwise a silent and only suggestively intelligent entity, which I think adds to its sort of creepy, animalistic vibe. I think this takes away from that very dramatically. We're kind of met with this, blatantly, legible, this blatantly, literate thing here, that can send us notes, that writes down things on notes with its chitinous appendage. So it does feel a little hamstrung, a little shoehorned, and a little heavy-handed, particularly when it's in all caps like this. So I think that does take away from what essentially was the most interesting thing about this article, which once again was this sort of creepy, animalistic vibe that this anomaly has. And it's sad to see, because this is really a structural problem, because the author understands that they have to escalate this somehow. And so the way they decided to escalate it was just, in a very blatant, manner of a handwritten note in blue ink in this way. They kind of have to do this. It's once again hard to avoid setting yourself up for a misstep like this. Just technical footwork of the article. But I think it does trip over itself here. I don't think it got its footwork very well, and it landed here. Which I think was a kind of a sour note in the whole read and the whole sort of atmosphere that was being built up here. So I think it would have done better if the author could have avoided these explicitly human statements and human motions in such a direct fashion. Not that you couldn't insinuate some humanity to this anomaly and get away with it. It's just that in this direct fashion, haha, it's a pun. Its strengths up until this point, I think, have been subtlety and suggestion. And then the one other thing that really bothers me, and that I'm really trying to draw some sort of awareness of and attention to, is can I make this just a little bigger? I don't know if that made this bigger or not. I think it actually made it smaller. Yeah. Is this line, these last lines. This one is a good example of it. The significance of this is under review. So I wrote this week, I wrote a blog post all about that, and I wasn't sure what to give it, what to call it. I knew that it needed a name because we see this over and over and over and over again. But I decided to call it the whimper end, or the whimper ending. And it's a mistake that we see all the time. In fact, in this article, I wrote this, like I said, a few days ago. I don't think this SCP-6207 is included in this. No, here it is right here. Yeah, so this is the example. It's here. So there are 11 examples of this ending technique in this week of SCP articles. In the month of June. So, it just shows up over and over and over again. You see it all the time. Observation is ongoing. The significance of this is under review. Efforts to locate the entity are underway. The site has yet to make an official comment regarding these disappearances. A rewrite of this document to reflect the corpse new containment is pending. Results of the senior trial, the researcher's trial, are ongoing. I mean, this is the same thing over and over again. And so this article on my blog, which you can check out if you want to read more about this, it's lackoflepers.medium.com. And the title of this one is, it's not the most recent one, but it's The Whimper End in SCP Articles. I try to draw some attention to this because it's really an error. It's really a technical mistake. It's the analogy that I can give you is that if you have a band that's all playing together and the end of the song is coming up and they all land on this boom kind of staccato ending, and then it's almost as if, let's say, the lead singer didn't get the hint, didn't get the note, and kind of kept singing and mumbling a little bit, like with this awkward sort of realization that they should have ended with everybody else. And they sort of like keep mumbling the melody that they were singing for another like measure or two before they kind of just like slowly fade and flatulence out. Instead of it being this powerful ending, you have this flab at the end of the performance that feels like it shouldn't be there because it doesn't actually contribute anything. Anytime you see this style of ending, this whimper, and I call it a whimper end because it should be a bang, but it's a whimper instead, you can remove these lines. We saw this back in an Ecronac article a couple weeks ago that I think was one of the first times I started paying attention to this, because otherwise the article was so well written, it just seemed out of place. And I think, I don't want to toot my own horn, I think Ecronac went back and removed that. I was looking for examples and I couldn't find it. So it seems as though the message got through to Ecronac, which is cool to see. But more than that, just from, once again, a technical standpoint, this is a bad way to end your article. The statement doesn't mean anything. It doesn't tell us anything. We understand that the significance of this event is probably under review. I mean, that's the whole point of this documentation, and the whole point of the premise here is that this is an organization that's trying to understand these things. So just once again, just remove this in your mind and just read how it would end. Additionally, the SCP has begun to discard shredded fabric more frequently. End it right there. It's way more powerful of an ending if you do that. It's once again, you can go into the blog post to see if you want a little more analysis of why this is here, but this happens all the time. And so it's not a deal breaker, obviously. It's just a small technical detail, but I think anybody who's wanting to polish up their work and be a better writer is going to be interested inherently in those sorts of technical cues. So anytime you can remove that last sentence that doesn't actually say anything, it doesn't contribute to anything, you can take it away, and the article actually is improved when it comes to the end being stronger with a more powerful statement, you should do it. So it does commit this error at the end. It's sort of like the walk off into the sunset trope of clinical tone for the SCP Wiki. It's that last useless and pointless line. But on the whole, I think so. SCP-6207, I think this is an above average article. I think it's, like I said, everything about it that I was talking about, very interesting. So I don't think it's certainly not meh. It's certainly not weightlifting the whole of the SCP Wiki, but it certainly also is at the same time a ray of hope. I think this is a really, really good article. Fuck the rating. Who cares what that is? Obviously, it never really reflects the technical skill of most works in the SCP Wiki, but it's still not, it's not downtrodden at 25 in a week or so. But excellent job. Sword Lover 87, I think, wrote another good one here. There's one comment that I thought was really great. I always like to point out and appreciate good analysis, good on-site crit in the comment section here. And Dr. T, it's a very short one, so I'll read it. But I love this. It's that great level of weird that I love in SCPs and is a quick and satisfying read. There's a sweet spot of weirdness into it that I think it's just a nice way to put it. And then looking at the crit, I think the author did a great job. Lord is a highly talented critic, I think, and so his or their feedback, excuse me, I don't know the pronouns, their feedback is something good to get, I think. And then Radioactive Rads is another critic who shows up a lot in these comment sections, whose work I appreciate quite a lot. So if you want to be great, you surround yourself by great people, and it looks like this author did that, so good job. All right, that is it for that day. Once again, Harmony took the other day, so I'm doing every other day. But so we'll skip to, what's the next one on my list? SCP-6153. Here we go. Let's take a peek. Let's take a peek. What's going on here? This one, huh? This one. Yeah. Okay. So what is this? This is, wow. Look at all this going on up here. Right. So this is a designation given to a widespread phenomena affecting the outcomes of actions taken by approximately 19% of the population, which it goes on to sub-designate immediately, with not a lot of good distinction quite justifying those two things yet, I think. The phenomenon is measured in Tyche, I think is the name of a scientist, famous scientist. I'm probably saying the name wrong. The phenomenon is measured in Tyche radiation using the TEC and the current known maximum and minimum are +40 and -40 respectively. This is just pretty shoddy clinical tone right out of the gate. The phenomenon is measured in Tyche using the TEC and the current known maximum and minimum are, there's got to be a better way to make that flow. It just kind of, it feels awkwardly jointed together. And then so basically that's it. I'm not really sure how that's anomalous. I think in the description is probably where you want to convey how it is that something that you're talking about is anomalous, and yet this article does not do that. We're basically told that this is just some kind of phenomenon. We're given a percentage, and then the rest of the description is basically some technobabble when it comes to what we end up seeing is the tonal focus of this article. So it goes on. Obviously the image is constructed around this. The containment procedures are kind of constructed around that. And then really all the testing logs are constructed around this ambient Tyche level measurement. So, and then it kind of drags on. It certainly, I think, does not justify its own length because we're really, as you can already tell, hopefully, not really given a lot to work with here. And so it's just it's like trying to spread too thin of butter or jelly on your toast. It doesn't quite get past a few smears. That's kind of what this article feels like. Going back just a little bit, these are things that are a little less technical, a little more subjective on my end here. But I think it's always sad when the conprocs have to occupy themselves so much in the way of explaining the secondary classes, the secondary esoteric classes that it's decided for itself. For example, this one is Principalis. Which basically sounds cool, and that's about as far as I think it gets. If you have to go into a lot of detail in the containment procedures as to what your secondary class means, that's really the opposite point of containment procedures and of object classes. The whole point of something like Safe, Keat, or Euclid is to convey a lot of information very quickly without having the need to sort of expound upon it and give a lot of throat clearing when it comes to fitting it into the article to where it makes sense. That's really something that I think the SCP Wiki has gotten a little stir-crazed about. They've gone a little off the deep end when it comes to these containment classes and the secondary classes, particularly. Of course, the risk class and disruption class of the ACS gave it the opportunity to exponent that again into what now is a highly uninformative way to present information to the point where once again, if you're having to occupy a decent chunk of your containment procedures as to why this thing is not this secondary class, but is another secondary class instead, I think you've missed the point somewhere. You've probably taken a wrong turn. It doesn't seem like the author is very aware of that, though. And it doesn't seem like the whole wiki is aware of that on the whole, unfortunately, but that's just me. The whole article here, and once again, you can kind of see this as we scroll through. I mean, almost every test really has to do with a different Tyche radiation level. So it just kind of chooses, almost like throwing a dart at the board. Like, here's one. This is what happens when we're at -16. This one happens at 6. And I think the worst part about this is that it doesn't actually explain what this is. I think the best way to do that would have been to give us an actual anomaly so that we can associate this new sort of quantitative pseudoscientific metric with it so that we can kind of understand it. But instead, that's relegated to the testing logs where by the time we get here, the anomaly really is already buried in such an amount of technobabble that it's not really clear what it's supposed to be. And so it's hard to really get invested into these testing logs, actually, in my opinion, by this point. But having read the article, I can tell you it appears to be attempting to sort of quantify the anomalous science, which is another phrase that I have a lot of just logistical issues with. I don't think that makes sense quite at all. But it's attempting to sort of have this anomalous science of luck, in the same way that the wiki has done so for things like deific energy, like Akiva radiation, or demonic energy. We saw in a few articles in this past week about different forms of demonic radiation that are off put by certain deals that you make with the devil. Other things like this. This happens a lot. Really, you see this most prominently in pataphysics with something like SCP. I think it's 6747, where it attempts to just so, I guess the word is desperately, cocoon and solidify a lot of things that probably should remain inexplicably anomalous in a pseudoscientific framework of nomenclature and sort of a pseudoscientific paradigm. And so that kind of seems like what this article is trying to do. And if you read through the testing logs, it seems to be trying to do that with luck. So we have things like Rubik cubes that are attempted to be solved. These are essentially instances of luck, where you can have different presentations of luck, where different people have different luck, And so the article is seemingly completely constructed in order to establish, sort of in lore, a quantitative, pseudoscientific, pseudo-academic way of quantifying and measuring luck. And so it seems to be so much so that it's almost the author's excuse to try and enter into the lore with a scientific quantification methodology for luck. And that could sound interesting. Excuse me. That could sound interesting, sure. But all of these different ways of doing this, once again, you've got Akiva, you got demonic energy, you got the pataphysics, putting quantum physics and pataphysics sort of thing. It really doesn't do anything more to the object of this treatment, in this case, luck, than what you routinely and very pedestrianly, very casually get with something like video game stats. I mean, that's basically what we deal with here when we get to this point. I don't understand really personally why there's such a stark push on the SCP Wiki to provide anomalous science paradigms to these things that are, probably by definition inexplicable and unapproachable by science. That's kind of what the definition of an anomaly is. But I think what's lost in the attempt to be very, innovative and sort of creative in this way is that you're basically just rising to the level of your average video game. When you get to like your tyke level is plus 17. I mean, it kind of just feels like you're upping your stats in that way. So once again, the testing logs drill this into the reader's head over and over and over and over to the point of insult. I mean, like, it's really the same thing that happens over and over again in these testing logs. You kind of get it after the first one or the second one. And then in one of these addenda right here, the author tries to have the whole situation escalate by having this lead researcher, who is Gary Tyler, resign because they feel after some of these tests that this is too dangerous to test. And the problem with this is that the feeling of danger is not well communicated through these testing logs. By this point, we shouldn't have to rely on the statements of this Gary Tyler character to convince us that this is dangerous. We should know that this is dangerous because that's how the writing, that's the job of the writing. But unfortunately, in my opinion, by the time we get to this addendum, this is basically the first indication that this is like really dangerous, aside from explicitly being told these things, once again, if you look in the immediately previous test log. So it just, once again, seemed like there's way more attention being put on how can I put luck into the lore? How can I make this into sort of an anomalous science? Because that's what everybody else is doing with demonic energy and shit like this. And it really focuses on that more so than any other component to this article. It tries to get its profundity from second guessing its own axioms that it starts with. For example, there's a moment in this where it's like, we need to stop testing. What if we're wrong and the plus or minus 40 wasn't the limit? So it's kind of a cheap two-step on the part of the author, where the only reason that even potentially is profound is because they very staunchly established this as having that range earlier, and it just feels like it's a little kind of gimmicky of a move that doesn't really have the gravity that I think the author thinks it might. So I don't think it achieves that profundity quite at all. And then the article sort of meanders, trying to find an interesting application of this coined science. For example, giving people plus 10 luck statuses at will. These Project Lakshmi is really what that is people from the Foundation trying, now that they have a science for this, which is a little oxymoronic, trying to sort of apply this to people, sort of an applied science where they can grant people certain plus video game stat of lux, and then see what happens there. So we get essentially another round of these tests, just with, instead of it being sort of this ambient background metric, the Foundation tries to control it a little bit through their procedures and things like that. So like the first testing series, this series barely has a pulse to me. It's just very difficult to read through, with not a lot of payoff. And once again, we're talking about extreme length here. I mean, this is really the first collapsible, and halfway through that, we're halfway through the article. And there's also other sort of cheap, very poorly constructed attempts at escalation, like this overseer clearance verification thing, which, that's the cheapest and easiest way you could possibly try to inject some sort of gravitas into the article. Once again, the writing itself should be doing that, and unfortunately, by the time you do that, it's almost like just giving yourself a steroid shot. The article trying to give itself a steroid shot in the chest or something like that. So this was honestly, all in all, without going into it, it was such a forced and uneventful idea that I didn't finish reading it. So this is SCP 6153, and this goes into the category so bad that I didn't finish it. Part of that was because the length is just dramatically outsized to the creative potential of the idea, and certainly the author's treatment of it. This is an author swinging, I think, a lot higher than their weight class. It needs to be about an 100th of as long as it is as an article, given the thinness of the concept and the aimlessness of the narrative here, that struggles very, very hard to apply a direction to what is essentially this author's attempt to, once again, academize sort of luck into the SCP, thing. So we get another round of the whole article, actually, as a revised article, and so it doesn't flow well at all to me. I think this is bad and hard to read through. You can see some of this O5 discussion just doesn't seem very good. We get a lot of blocking action here that doesn't seem very O5-ish. It seems kind of childish, and we get some misplaced data corrupteds, which are essentially redactions, which in this case don't have any intrigue to them whatsoever and don't really contribute to the read. So this is really bad. I can't say that it's actively hurting the wiki because it only has a rating of plus 11, so people at least realize that this is not a very, very good article, I guess, if you're into ratings like that. But as far as I'm concerned, it's one level up from that. It's just so bad that I just couldn't justify actually reading through it. It was like a jar of pickles, and once I've had one, I don't need to eat the rest of the pickles in the jar to kind of get it. All right, so that's a SCP-6153. Don't know who the author was. I'm not gonna say it because I don't have a very good review of that one. SCP-6741 is the next one that we'll look at. This is another Sword Lover article. So I think, what was it, 2 ago? This is a very prolific author at this moment, and I want you to notice that because typically, not always, when a KCON test is coming up, we're about to have the 7,000 contest surely any day now here. People who are sort of hitting their stride tend to do really well. That is not to say that they win. That is how Tanhoney won the 5,000 contest. Tanhoney had released a bunch of articles very quickly. Very prolific. He was writing like every day, I think, and so that kind of primed him, I think, to get into a mode where he was able to write something as good as SCP-5000 and sort of run away with that contest. But Sword Lover seems to be kind of gearing up for that. To Staffer, obviously, is doing that with the high output right now. But you got to be careful, because unless they're good, you're just cheapening your brand. You're really watering things down. So let's see if Sword Lover can miss. The first one was really good. So what is this? This is a predatory humanoid which exclusively preys on humans possessing a specific set of traits. So it's kind of like a serial monster that kills you. It's a serial killer, but it's an anomaly monster too. So, this is an interesting article. It does kind of pull from older treatments where you have stages that they kind of go through and stage the hunting patterns of this SCP. There is some very interesting imagery that the author works with here. Once again, we just looked at that really nice article from Sword Lover 87 with the arachnoid sort of chitinous appendage that comes out of the clothing and the chair. And so I think one of this author's strengths is imagery, and just focusing very, very acutely, bringing very, very good images into focus for the read. And this is what happens in this second paragraph, the description. Just some very, very interesting imagery about what happens when someone is predated by this humanoid anomaly, and what that looks like, and how it's unique in the way of, I'm going to kill you, murder monster kind of stuff. And so we get kind of a detailed glimpse into how this thing operates. Interestingly, this thing can't really be contained. It's not very well contained by the anomaly, by the Foundation, excuse me, which is interesting given that we know so much about its habits and its lifestyle. But that just kind of speaks, I think, to the anomaly being interesting and difficult. And then we get a couple of addenda here. Basically, the first sentence kind of paints this nicely for you. The ethics committee authorized basically a D-class personnel to get killed by this thing so that they can kind of get a closer look into what's going on. And then we can see just structurally from the article that we get an urgent file update. So this obviously by this point, by the end of the read here, we've gotten something of a twist in the setup that the author has given us here. So having read this article, I think it feels kind of like a combination between the Yule Man, which is SCP 4666, and SCP 102. 106. Which everybody knows is the old man. It kind of feels like it's kind of those two kind of combined. I don't think it is better than either of those, and so it kind of takes the good parts about both of those ideas and makes them worse by joining them. It's essentially a monster that kills you, but it does also have this compulsion effect that's sort of buried in there. It's not really explicitly stated. The author has decided to not really kind of draw a lot of attention to the fact that there is a compulsion effect at play here as well. And so there's something ambitious about that, right? I mean, if you can get in the direction of a murder monster on the SCP Wiki that has a compulsion effect attached to it, that's a low probability play. So obviously, if it works, it's pretty great. But and then there's a couple things about this that just structurally irk me. We have this urgent file update right here, and we have this header that really goes in the extra mile when it comes to trying to tell the reader how urgent this is with these little, I guess these are like symbols or emojis or something with a little exclamation point, caution. This is one of those moments where the structure of the article and the way that it's designed, that is to say, the pacing that it has to adopt in order to set the reader into the proper framework of understanding so that the reader can be twisted by the end, really upsets some things that result in this not making a lot of sense. So for example, if there's an urgent file update, right? Like, once again, let's think in character here, because all good art always stays in character, right? Good art will never compromise with its own integrity. Okay, that's what makes good art good art. Okay, it's what makes a good TV show and good acting. Those two things. If you break your character, if you put a blooper reel into your show in the middle of the scene, your art is ruined. Okay, so it's important for you to stay in character and be commitmental to whatever the premise is of your art. And so this kind of comes into conflict with that, because if this is such an urgent file update, what is it doing at the bottom of the article? I mean, I know out of universe, it's the only place that the author can put it. I get that. But I mean, if it's this urgent to put these emojis next to it, even to like, I think the foundation would probably make an exception, just because the point is to not get people killed, and this is the kind of information that needs to probably not be at the very bottom of the article after you've been misdirected by the whole thing. And so in that way, the design, the machinery, the machining of this article, the manufacturing of this article, I think is less than good. I think it sort of fumbles over itself, trying to get where it wants to go, on the field. And, it's not a good look. So this is really a trope. It's given a name. It's be as unhelpful as possible. We see this a lot. This is kind of an inherent structural challenge of the containment fiction genre. So a really great example of this is probably the best example of this is Oh Death, which everybody knows is a DJ Cactus article. So I hope I'm not ruining this for you. Spoiler alert. But that article really is a very good example of it's a good article. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be contrarian and say that it's not good. It is good. It's really good. But it doesn't really reconcile this same problem, which is that how in universe are you going to justify misdirection in this way? How are you going to not include that information that you really probably should know? Going into the anomaly, you probably should know what happens in Odeth. Like, they kind of figured out what happened. They kind of know enough about it to know what not to do. In those types of articles, the misdirection is saved until the very end as an entertainment effect, and it does so in some ways, making compromises with the integrity of the art. Now, there's ways to do that where you don't run into that problem. Oh Death doesn't do that very well. That's really one of the technical problems of that article. And this is another one that doesn't do it very well. It just doesn't make a lot of sense why this is all the way at the bottom. So anyway, unless you're reading this from an out of universe perspective, which is not where you want to be if you're trying to enjoy an art form. Nobody in a theater wants to be reminded that you're sitting in a theater. You want to forget that you're sitting in a theater. That's really the whole point. So anyways, something else that really bothers me that I do want to point out, and we're kind of getting into more subjective territory here, obviously, but I'll never understand the edgelord sort of try-hard purple prose that SCP authors gladly put into collapsibles. I don't know what about collapsibles makes them so, set up to be treated in this way. I don't know what collapsibles did to deserve this, but it's very, very, very common to have, real like try hard edgelord sort of live journal poetry sort of inclusions in collapsibles, whether it's the show, which is what it shows up here, or it's the hide, which shows up when you click it. And so when we click this one, we get a really cringy hide that says a broken bulwark lets the frigid wind in. And once again, just from an in-universe perspective, this doesn't make any sense. If this was a TV show, this would be a character misspeaking a line, or this would be, the camera accidentally catching part of the set construction that's supposed to be behind the scenes. It doesn't make any sense in universe. And so it's kind of the vibe from this whole article. It's very, very clear that the author is trying some bold things, but has certainly deprioritized really the fundamentals of the art form in order to try to get a lot of these things conveyed. So this is just a very egregious example of that. It's totally unnecessary. At least this urgent file update thing showing up at the end is somewhat necessary. I mean, it's not necessary, but it's more understandable, because where else are you going to put it? This has to escalate, right? So, but this is just totally uncalled for. I mean, it just forget the broken bulwark. You just broke the suspension of disbelief, and just completely vacuumed out any in-character engagement that I had with this article by this point. It just, how in the world could it be there? It couldn't. Who in the Foundation would type this in? At this point in the document, the author doesn't care about this or doesn't think about this. Either way, it's not a good thing. Unfortunately, this comes off as this is a competent article. A competent author. I do like Sword Lover 87 quite a lot. I think they do a lot of good work. And then once again, Sword Lover 87 is a very competent critic and analyst for this art form. So, what that means to me is that this isn't an author who can feign ignorance about this. This is somebody who understands the trade-off that they're making very clearly. And so that makes sort of the whole thing cheapened for me, because it very clearly is only about, for this author, adding something in that attempts to cheaply convey a sense of these sort of grim, dark poetics. Really the same effect and execution as we'd see with something like Zalgo text. Just there's better ways to try to get this effect, and it's not a good thing to see, I think. So the complete understanding of this anomaly, I think, baffles the position the article started out taking regarding its inability to be contained. So as we read through it, we see that it's very, the Foundation has really pinpointed where this thing lives. It lives in a cave in Siberia that they really understand well. It doesn't really make a lot of sense why that cave itself can't be cordoned off, or why the entity can't be captured while it's inside when they know it's inside. Those things are not really addressed, I think, by the article. So it sort of misses its own logic in some places. That sort of causes the eyebrows to raise just slightly. It's just not clear how these things are reconciled by the article itself. And then as you've probably guessed, and as the author will go on to mention in the comment here, I wanted to try my hand at the murder monster. So the article really does try to subvert the whole trope. But once again, the reveal of this at the end, I think, prevents that subversion from actually happening. It doesn't work well, because you'd have to introduce some ambiguity throughout the description that leads the reader, or at least gets the reader started on the process, on the road to guessing or second guessing the nature of this anomaly. If you're going to twist something like this at the end, you have to sort of very artfully and skillfully lay moments of questioning, throughout the process. This doesn't do that. It really harped very strongly on what this anomaly definitively was. Even going so far as to definitively have these stages here laid out for us very clearly. And so it doesn't really establish that ambiguity that would then come back and pay off when you've done this switcheroo, right? The reveal doesn't mesh well with the setup at all. So it becomes an exercise in subversion for its own sake, which never really works out very cleanly. And that I get the feeling from this article that the author was probably over-focused on how to misdirect the reader so as to make it seem like an effective reveal. And at some point, that's obviously what's going to have to happen, because this is a monster, this is a murder monster. And so what is there to do with that on the SCP Wiki anymore than to just like try to subvert it? So, subversion for its own sake never works out. You have to have a good idea that ends up subverting something, I think. Rarely does it work in the other direction. So, without that effective reveal, there's moments along this that feel contrived to get to that end too. Like, for example, there's one point where a drone is sort of introduced into the abode of this anomaly. And for some reason, the drone suddenly decides to kill the anomaly because the anomaly looked at it funny or something like that. And so the anomaly looking at this drone, for some odd mechanic that's never really explained and doesn't really have any good reasoning. Here it is right here in this paragraph. For some reason, it sends the drone into a frenzy, and the drone decides to try to kill this anomaly. And it just so happens that is what opens the door to this whole like subversion of this whole entire monster thing. So I think it's ambitious. It's admirable for the author to try to do this. Obviously, I'm a fan of this author. I don't think this was a hit. I think this was a pretty bad miss. There's one comment in here that I thought was pretty good. Frog Hoppers, who likes the article. So, this might be a good place to be if you liked the article as well. Love how you played around with the murder monster archetype and explored the consequences of hasty Foundation action that we gloss over in other articles. The scientific method for the win. Plus, atmosphere of the piece is well crafted and immersive, which it really is. I read it 2 days ago, and I've been thinking about it since. I enjoy how you made the suffering of the victims after the monster's death apparent, but not like pornographic. It does exactly what it needs to. The only thing I wonder is if the accidental neutralization of the monster was the strongest way to convey the correlation, not causation point. but it works for me. So that's just a really great comment. I mean, it's a little more praising than I got with this article, although I do agree with everything that it says good about this article. But yeah, this part right here, we explored the hasty consequences of the Foundation action, sort of glossing over the detail that's needed to properly enact the scientific method. Well, that's a very generous interpretation of what happened in this article. I think maybe a more realistic way to say that is that the Foundation wasn't really given that sort of staunch intelligence that we would maybe expect from them, that they probably would know, because this is their day job, that they would need to try to avoid in order for something like this mix-up to not happen. And of course, that once again collapses the entire attempt at this subversion here. So the article, I think, in just one sentence, has to stretch a little too hard to get where it wants to go. It tries to play with the questions of correlation and causation, and how less than extreme care in this regard can result in very wrong answers. But again, I feel this is like a pretty secondary and almost pasted on desire. It's really pasted on the desire to write a subversive murder monster article, and that kind of comes through a little too stenchfully, a little too strong on the nose. It doesn't really jog the neurons or come across as a serious philosophical quagmire, which I think is what the author was trying to do. So this is SCP-6741. I certainly don't think it's a bad article. I just don't think it achieves what it wants to do. It was definitely good enough to finish. I think it would have been a ray of hope if it achieved what it wanted to do very well. So it's going to have to go in the meh category pretty firmly. But for a meh article, this is pretty good. I do recommend it. Once again, Sword Lover, I think, is very talented. So, all right, try not to cough. How far are we in? 2 hours. 2 hours in. How much further do we got to go? I think we got a ways to go, gang. Let's do a couple more. We generally like to take a little intermission here, so I can get some more water and then just kind of take a minute. Bless me, help me out here. But let's do a couple more. SCP before we do that intermission. SCP-6435, and that's when the true fans will stay around. By the way, after the intermission. All right, this one. Yeah, as you can see, I hate the rating shows up so quickly, but as you can see, this is a very successful article, SCP-6435. So what is this? So this is Afterlife. They give it a specific designation, colloquially referred to as Row, which is just a great name. And it's a very, very short article, as you can see. It's got a nice, engaging photograph. I'm not sure what's going on here. If my mouse, I don't know if you can see this right here, but when my mouse hovers over this, it looks like something tries to pop up. But it doesn't quite get there because it's covered by the picture. But it's a really nice picture. The psychology of this picture is outstanding. I mean, the author certainly knows, has a good eye, knows what picture to select, because the picture itself is good. I mean, obviously it has a very, very dramatic focal point, a lot of contrast in there. You automatically want to see if there's something in there. And of course, there's this whole sort of geographical psychology that goes into this picture where you feel like you are almost being pulled into this, like you want to find out more. So that's kind of a pretty good summary of the article, actually. The whole thing is just incredibly technically and well written. This is above average clinical tone. The caption is interesting. It's very simple. It's barely descriptive at all, except for the word spirit photography of this anomaly, which is very interesting immediately. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm really interested to know. So it's great hook work by the author. The first line of the containment procedures is awesome as well, which I'll just read. As SCP cannot be breached by living souls, physical containment is a non-issue. That's one of the best lines I've read in the last month, easily. The whole thing is just very succinct. It's got no fat on it whatsoever. It's incredibly muscular. Gets everything that it wants to get done with very, very quickly. The containment procedures, for example, are 2 sentences, and once again, one of them is one of the better sentences that I've read in a while on the wiki. So the description really doesn't skip a beat. It really keeps that pace up. It's a very, very good description. It's very simply stated while having a density of a backstory and some content to that that you kind of get when you read through it. The author is finding very, very clever and very original ways to communicate what are pretty routine and common ideas to the SCP Wiki. Like, so for example, we can look at this one. If I can find it, yeah. Time within the SCP measures one-to-one with reality. I mean, you don't see that described in that way every day. I really appreciate the artisanry of the sentence description here, the sentence construction. One of the joys of clinical tone that I think a lot of people who write in containment fiction don't really take advantage of or understand is that you have the opportunity to really, convey, the same idea in very creative ways. And this is a good example of that. You could have said this a million ways. In fact, most authors would have said this in a way that was a lot more average. SCP does not have any temporal anomalous attributes associated with it, whatever. But just the way that the author has gotten from point A to point B to convey this idea, really, really, really talented. Really, really good job. This is somebody who is so proficient with clinical tone, they can get it to sing. They can pull melodies out of clinical tone, which is the hardest thing to pull melodies out of, if you think about it. Right. I mean, it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's something about poetry, for example, lends itself well to a musicality. Not so for clinical tone, which is very dry. It's very technical. Depending on who you ask, they may not believe that you can be musical with clinical tone. But I disagree. I beg to differ, and I think this is a very good example of that. The author really, really knows what they're doing here. Again, later we have another such sentence. Losing, let's see, typically this unpredictable cycle of torture and pleasure, which we'll get to, results in the inhabitants of the SCP losing their mental coherency over the course of their first 10 years. I mean, that's just another way to say that not other people would be able to do that. It's a little flourish. A lot of people can play a piano piece, but that one person who's really, really good, even though it's the same piece and the same notes, somehow plays it better than everybody else. That's kind of what we're looking at here. We also have great vocab words. I'm always just a vocabophile there. And so anytime I see a word that I don't know, I get a little geeky. It's kind of like cheap CSS to me. Same thing. Most people are really kind of wowed and bedazzled. Sort of a talent of bedazzlement when it comes to things like CSS treatment and flashy colors and shit like that. That doesn't work on me. Those Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. But good vocabulary words, they work on me. So if you have a good vocab word, I'll probably be charmed by you pretty quickly. And this is a great one. Servitor, not really a common term. Had to look it up. See that here. A person, excuse me, a person who serves or attends on a social superior. That's just a cool concept. That's why words are so valuable. They can kind of crystallize thoughts that otherwise are difficult to put into words. And that's what they're good for. So anyway, so the anomaly here in this article, you can see it's just a description, basically. It's 2 sentences of containment procedures. It's a photo. It's all green. We got green lights all the way up here in the ACS. I mean, it's level 3. So yeah, it's just the description, So, I mean, how many authors can do this? Not many. It picks up a lot of steam and altitude in the next paragraph here by introducing this hell-like mechanism, which gives a nice splash of dissonance with the almost serene-like character of the afterlife that the anomaly has sort of adapted so far. Like up until this point, you kind of think it's like this nice resort, for the afterlife. That's not the case. And this paragraph lets you know that one. So it's a nice little changing of the gear shifter for this article. It really kind of kicks it up just a little bit with that. It beckons questions of religious justification and sort of deconstructs this classical idea of religious tenets creating an afterlife in order to incentivize behavior. It sort of throws that whole idea into a blender where the afterlife is concerned by having this particular afterlife be nearly blind to morality or justice or who it's dealing with. So it's sort of like crapshoot. It's sort of like gambling or like just throwing dice, and maybe you'll get, punished. Maybe you'll get a foot massage, in this afterlife here. It really has nothing to do with anything. It's just totally chance-based, which is quite a subversion of typical religious incentivation sort of incentive mechanisms you see. So once again, this is another good example to kind of contrast the last article with. I don't think the author was trying to subvert religious punishment and reward paradigms, but that's kind of what happens here. Just because it's good, it's that good. It finds that it's sort of like the butterfly landing on you, as opposed to like trying to get the butterfly to land on you. It's not going to work. The article even wonders what sort of religion this afterlife could be the cultural result of, the cultural product of, which has some really subtle but profound mechanics of story logic and almost pataphysics, if you kind of want to read that into it. Just a little flavor, just the hintest little flavor and spice on that one. But so this is just an excellent, excellent read. And it's no surprise that the author is Tanhony. Are you surprised? I'm not. Of course, it's a joy to read this without knowing that this is Tanhony, because it really reaffirms in a scientific way that we're looking at someone who's really good at this art. We don't have to rely on the brand name to kind of dupe us and trick us or try to short circuit our reception into saying that this is good. We can get there by the article's own merits. So once again, Sword Lover, who we've been reading a lot of and who I've said several times on this stream so far that I'm a big fan of, not only as an author, but when it comes to crit on the page, on the discussion page, has a good comment here. So this is a pretty good take on the death or suffering forever formula. I probably wouldn't like it as much if it weren't for the implication that this thing is like a flytrap afterlife, which is a great phrase, capturing souls every so often for reasons unknown. We have no idea where it comes from. And then it's once again just like sort of this animalism that's deaf to the more human parts of what we typically think of when we think of the afterlife, like morality or did you do a good job on Earth or whatever. So this post-death ecosystem is good stuff. Once again, Tanhony he likes to get on a roll just before a KCON, so watch out. But this is a really, 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 really good article. This is way above average. So if we want to go to our little thing here, this is SCP-6435. So this is definitely weightlifting the whole SCP Wiki. That's the best category here. This is so far and above the typical quality of an SCP article that's coming out these days that it almost single-handedly justifies continuing reading the SCP Wiki for someone like me, because you get these good ones. This is certainly one that weightlifts the whole standards of the SCP Wiki by itself. Because if it weren't for articles like this, the semblance of standards at this site would be gone. I'll tell you that right now. All right, so that seems like a decent place to take a little bit of a break. We do this intermission. It usually lasts about 5 to 10 minutes, just long enough for me to kind of catch my breath, get some water. So stick around if you want to be on the other end of that. We'll finish the rest of these articles this week, which on the whole, I think has been a pretty good week for the Wiki. So it's going to be exciting to see these 7,000 contest entries come out. I think that'll be fun. So anyways, we'll pick it up there when I get back. Give me about 5 minutes. It's about 20 past the hour right now. So I'll be back about, 25 past the hour, maybe 30 past the hour, something like that. So have an intermission with me, go to the restroom, get yourself a drink, get yourself a smoke, whatever you do. And I will see you in just a minute or two. All right. All right. Probably should have tried to cough before I came back on. What's going on? That was a pretty quick break, but hey, got me a nice. Would like to thank our sponsor for the show, for the stream tonight, Spindrift, and thanks, guys. This is really tasty. It's orange mango, and here's the best ad for this product, which is that my wife bought some of these and told me that if I drink one, then I'm a dead man. So don't tell her, okay? She does not know, but this is pretty good stuff. Get that nice little frizziness to it. Okay, so let's get back to work because we got some work to do. That was SCP-6435 by Tan Honey. Just a great job. Yeah. Okay, so SCP-6248 is where we're going next. All right, yeah. I remember this one. This one's just one of those ones that you don't forget. And later in life, when you're scrolling through the Series 7, list of all the names and all the, you'll be like, oh yeah, like fuck, I remember that one. So this is a very, very interesting article, very unique article. Just let's get into a little bit of it objectively for a second here. So what is it? It is a cursed spring on some sort of like hill, I guess. The mouth of the spring forms, all this stuff. Just nice description going on here. And then it gushes forth a white phlegm of vith. And phlegm is just an absolutely gross term, one of the worst, but obviously it works really well here. So yeah, it's this like little well that basically the Foundation tries to eat, which is real gross, absolutely disgusting. And so it affects some people by having an illness of the stomach. So, excuse me, guys. What makes this anomalous is basically that it's just of an unknown composition. So we'll kind of get around to this, but that ends up being a little bit of a hang up for me. But let's talk a little more high level here before we get into the specifics. Obviously, this article looks good. It's got aggressive visuals with a nice little tagline up here. Everyone dies in the dark, which is kind of a nice, obviously, little funny play on the cultural shibboleth. that everybody knows. Interesting flair to the conprox. So, for example, this statement right here, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, does translate to the sacred reason for the procedure, which is pretty cool. And that kind of puts the tone of this whole article into position right away. That plus the introduction of a holy site, holy site 6248, really gives this whole article a very ecumenical vibe, very quickly. The author adapts this sort of apostolic kind of accent to the prose, which is very believable and is very appealing. It's just a great in-character speech, a very, very, very polished accent that the author does, and really maintains throughout with no real blemishes, with a good job. So it's even charming at times. I'll give you a good example. If I can spell right, expulsion. Yeah. So talking about how this white phlegm of Yvith affects people. It affects their stomach. They report variously pain within the abdomen, churning of the bile, swelling of the stomach, the expulsion of air from the behind, and the expulsion of liquefied fecal matter. So obviously the author is having a little bit of a fun, sort of juvenile, sort of potty humor sort of thing in here. But it's okay, because usually when that would be kind of obnoxious, here it's couched in this really convincing sort of character speak. And that's probably the way that this sort of person would write that. So it's fine. There's a -A description here that we already took a look at, which is very creative, and it's kind of gross that the Foundation has tasted this, and it's just a nice little thing that's subtly thrown in there. So, I mean, this takes and runs with milk, so that's, anybody who knows anything about the SCP Wiki understands that it is fascinated with milk. It's basically a cheat code. You can basically write about milk and it will be a success. It's kind of like a hack for the SCP Wiki. Don't ask me why. It's been around for a long time, but milk is basically, you can't miss. You can't miss with milk. They love their milk at the SCP Wiki. And so this kind of basically ends up being what this white phlegm of Yvith is. It kind of anomalizes it just slightly, but basically you're supposed to get, as a reader of the SCP Wiki, and sort of, in on the joke that this is milk. So it kind of takes this milk Jesus thing and kind of, sort of cartoonizes the Jesus part of it by being this whole, like, holy thing that we're getting here. But, surprisingly, I don't really mind that. Usually I would have probably shut the article off by this point, called it, and then probably put it in the category of I didn't finish it. But I really didn't mind it this time. There's just a lot of effort put into this article, particularly the interesting character in which it is written. And so I think it's sufficiently creative from that source material of Milk Jesus, that it kind of stands alone with sufficient strength on its own. Excuse me. The only issue resulting from this is the end, which I think at the end gets rather abrupt. Because honestly, by this point, the article has made the jokes that it wants to make, and it has done enough to kind of get to where it wants to go, which is haha Milk Jesus, but kind of a little more stuffy, of a presentation. But the end is almost as if it slams on the brake as opposed to coming to a nice stop. Not without some whiplash to the pacing, I think. It's as if the article itself drank of this white phlegm and had to run off to the bathroom real quick. I think that's the real miss of this article. It was interested in dressing up what's essentially a meme and some stylistic elegance, but it wasn't really developed after that. It didn't really need to be developed after that, because once again, as soon as you're playing that meme card on the SCP Wiki, you're golden. But I think ultimately it couldn't be developed more than that. I don't think this idea really had a lot of legs to it. I don't think it had a lot of gas in the tank. It's once again, it basically just does what it wants to do and then gets out of the way. So that can kind of explain how the ending feels a little abrupt and a little unsatisfying. Once again, this article is not without its flaws, but it's just such a well done character type, and it gives such a nice vibe and tracing. I think it outweighs the flaws in this article. So this being SCP-6248, here it is right here. I would say this is a ray of hope. because typically, you know, I think it's pretty low hanging fruit. It's very lazy typically to have something like milk and milk Jesus be basically what the article is. That really, to me, I'm tempted to put that in the actively lowering the bar. I usually probably would put that in the actively lowering the bar, because if we're supposed to be on a site that really values good writing, and you can basically hack it by writing about milk, you know, or milk Jesus, you know, that's probably lowering the bar at the wiki. But this one, like I said, just has so much creativity into it. The author very carefully went through and made this consistently stylistic in this fashion. I think it just does a good job. So it kind of flips me on my head, where usually I'd be kind of upset at this article for being kind of cheap and low effort, and instead actually ends up being a very good example of how you can, you know, do good meme work. You know, is it a outstanding article? No, you know, but I think the author would probably be the first person to say that. I don't think they're trying to do anything but have fun. So, you know, there is some good writing in here in addition to that. So I think it's pretty good. It is written by Lord, who obviously this is quite loud of an announcement down here. I don't think I've ever clicked on one of these, but yeah, Lord. What is my relationship with Lord? I don't really have one. I don't think that they know that I exist, but I routinely appreciate Lord's contributions in the discussion section of articles. Very, very, very good critic, very good analyst for SCPs. So yeah, there's some kind of nightfall setting here. That's where the stylistic choices came from. That's great. The comment section I think is pretty fun. I mean, usually I'm not a fan of meme comment sections. Usually you get like sort of NPC bot level reactions where they just regurgitate the one thing that the article is about. Like in this case, usually it would be milk +1, which you know is about on the intelligence level of my 2-year-old child. She could probably do that pretty well. So I don't like seeing that. I think it basically makes the wiki a lot dumber when stuff like that is pretty good. But this comment section I think is pretty cool. Sword Lover kind of says it all. It took me a second, but I like it. And then I thought this was pretty fun. So Plague PJP is obviously an antagonist to me and everything that I try to do, probably without good reason. I'm guessing it's probably because their friends don't like me. But Plague PJP, I wanted to bring this out here. So Plague PJP shouts me out because I don't know if you know this, but me and Harmony, who are you know, I guess the most evil people in the world, coined the term Neo-Lol Foundation to explain the growing trend, the very solidified trend on the SCP Wiki by this point, that that explicitly prioritizes you know, breaking the art form, just like I've been talking about. It's explicitly trying to introduce gag reels and blooper reels into the middle of a show's episode because they want to have a Snicker Fest session with their friends. Neo-Lol Foundation makes explicit compromises with the premise of the art form in order to be kind of stupid. That's basically what Neo-Lol Foundation is. So this is pretty funny to see. I certainly can laugh at myself, no problem. But yeah, that's typically, you know, a reaction that I have to a lot of articles, really written by Plague PJP. They're probably why they don't like me very much. Plague, I would say, is a patron saint of Neo-Lol Foundation. Really doesn't understand, I think, probably what it is, according to this comment, because this article is not Neo-Lol Foundation. I hate to tell you that. Unfortunate that this is someone who's really one of its most offensive patron saints and can't get the insult right. This really is not even close to Neo-Lol Foundation. So I would recommend that Plague PJP go read the Containment Fiction Wiki. There's an entry on LOL Foundation, which of course dates back to about the earliest years of the SCP Wiki, you know, 2012 even, probably before that. And there's a section dedicated to Neo-Lol Foundation. So I would encourage that Plague PGP actually goes and reads that, because they do not understand what they're talking about. The term is not used correctly here. So Plague, why don't you go learn about yourself and read in that section. But I love that we live in your head. Lord has a good sense of humor about this as well, so that's funny to see. It's sad, isn't there? Yeah, so phlegm intolerance. So basically the whole article, if you haven't figured it out, is about being lactose intolerant and sort of tying that into Milk Jesus Ing. So, yeah, this is a good article. Not Neo-Law Foundation, not even close. Because because one thing it doesn't do is it doesn't render the foundation as an incompetent organization so that someone can laugh about it. There's none of that here. This just happens to be kind of funny. There's a difference between kind of being funny and being Neo-Law Foundation. Of course, that distinction is lost on someone like Plague BJP, but I guess we can't expect someone to understand that who hasn't actually done their reading and their homework. So this one we already rated. I think it's really good. You should check it out. 6248 by Lord. I'm not going to try to pronounce the rest of that name. Okay, moving right along here. How many more do we have? Let's just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Damn. All right, that's fine. SCP 6771. So this is yeah, okay, so wow. Speaking of milk. This is a 27-year-old male of Canadian descent that is affected by a non-anomalous effect in which it cannot see milk. And then basically the article takes a very interesting turn immediately where it tries to Truman show this person's perception of milk so that this person will never see milk. So I just talked about how basically milk is basically a cheat code on the SCP Wiki. You can basically write anything, and as long as you are, just averagely competent, mildly competent, as long as you're the kind of person, if this were a car, if you could just drive down the interstate without getting into a wreck, that's really the level of competency that you need to be at if you want to write about milk on the SCP Wiki, because it's probably going to work. And so this is a really good example of that. So basically if we actually read the article, there is nothing anomalous about this. And so this definitely is Neo-Law Foundation, by the way. This is definitely Neo-Law Foundation, because what happens here is that there's explicit compromises with stupidity in order to make this article work. And one of them is that there's actually not an anomaly here. It even says that. It's not a non-anomalous effect in which it cannot see milk. And so the whole article basically plays around with this framing concept of, it goes into a lot of detail. There's moments where obviously the article is not interested in taking itself very seriously. It talks about how despite this affliction, the SCP leads an otherwise normal life as an amateur sports coach and serial killer. And this is all funny stuff. I do wish that it had a J on it, because then there would be no problems to this article, because you can do whatever the hell you want to with the J. But at this point, this is basically a blooper reel that's been dropped into the middle of a Breaking Bad episode. And I'm sure that there are some people, on the show that think that's funny, that chuckle to themselves, but it makes for a really bad viewing. And that's kind of what this article does. So that's why this is Neo-Law Foundation, is because it makes explicit compromises with the basic premises of the art form in order to rip itself out of the art form and basically do whatever the fuck it wants to do, because it's haha, look at me, I'm funny and I'm cute. So this absolutely is Neo-Law Foundation. So the image is hard to see, certainly from where you are as well. But it's kind of this vague image of a person in a suit. You can kind of see a suit and tie and a little bit of a smile here. It's kind of like a darker version of like SCP 4999 or 9999. It's kind of there. It's hard to see. The whole thing is a fuck you smirk, right? The whole thing is. So, a lot of people like that. I get that. I'm really alone on my own hill screaming that we should probably still be taking this as an art form kind of seriously. If we were making a show, we probably would want to separate the outtakes as their own thing, which is fine. They're hilarious and great, but let's not put it in the middle of the show. That's what this article is. So it's just the presence of milk, basically, is what this article is. It's just milk. It's taken to be sufficient for an article by now in the SCP Wiki, like I said. It does make fundamental compromises with stupidity in order to break the art form for the sake of the lulz that strives towards sort of a fleeting meme humor rather than anything approaching, an attempt at good writing or timeless writing. Although that's not to say this is bad writing. Obviously, the person who's doing this knows what they're doing. Talented writer, just unfortunately actively making this worse. So if you haven't guessed it yet, this is SCP-6771, and I would firmly put this in the actively lowering the bar category for the wiki. The author who's doing this has done this before. There was a SCP called Dinner Party. This is the same author, although I thought Dinner Party was really, really fucking good. The author likes to put these author notes sort of in the document, which is another concession that the author does not mind making towards devolving the containment fiction genre into anything else that you would see on the internet, like fan fiction. And of course, this is starting to become a little bit of a pattern where the author tells us a story that's supposed to explain and give some sense to the article, but doesn't. And so once again, the whole thing is it's a joke. The whole thing is a joke. But we're at the point now in the wiki and in the cultural zeitgeist where you don't really have to put a J on it. And that, I think, speaks volumes to the people who are actively writing at the wiki. They don't see the need. They don't have the framework to understand why it is that something like this could be a J and be just as good, actually better. It would avoid all the problems. The entirety of the Neo-Law Foundation school of thinking and composition could be dissolved into the -J. It's just that the people who do that, for some reason, don't. I guess they think it's funnier when they don't do that. And there's certainly some sort of anti-arts, anti-humor kind of thing to that, but it just kind of comes off as really, really bad, really lazy stuff that doesn't play well to the strengths of this project, unfortunately. So I'm not even sure what the author is trying to do. I mean, like, obviously it's just kind of surrealism. That's kind of what the dinner party was too. But I feel like this lacks all of the charm of the dinner party. And part of that is because it's very clear that the author understands that they can write about milk and kind of expect it to sort of be good enough just because it's kind of about milk. And then the way that you know that is that in the discussion section, which this thing is almost ratioed, you do get NPC bot level 2-year-old intelligence level comments such as milk +1. Milk, shame on you, sword lover. I was just praising you. I think this is a pretty good comment. The article wants to be the Truman Show. The build-up and the bizarreness obviously are strengths for this article. I downvoted because of the punchline and the forced meme milk. You could replace it with something else besides milk, and it would be the same and even better for being original. And of course, this author decides to sort of play dumb. It says, "I'm sorry you didn't enjoy the punchline. It was meant to highlight the extent of human cruelty," and goes on this like diatribe where how this actually is deep, and then says, "I'm not sure what milk meme is. I chose milk because dairy is one of the most common food items that humans consume." Like, no, like, you're not fooling anybody. Like, nobody is convinced by this. Sorry, like, it's very clear that you know what you're doing here. So, that's just kind of the whole vibe of this article. It almost seems like somebody's just trying to see what they can get away with, like just fucking around. And I mean, hey, the main demographic on the SCP Wiki is age 15 to 19. So you think they're going to have a problem with this kind of stuff? No, they're not. That's really why I'm here, by the way. I'm an old man. What the hell am I doing here? I happen to think that the genre is pretty mature. I think that it can basically be as sophisticated as any other form of literature. I often compare the containment fiction genre to something like, a haiku, just in that there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it. And it's fine if you want to fuck around with it, but you might not be writing a haiku at that point. And so that's kind of what I think about things like this. It's clearly elements that should be a J. The author feels like they're above the observation of that because they're just daring and special. I hate to say it, but this article it would probably do well in a museum that traced the downfall of the SCP Wiki's standards. The presence of this article on the SCP Wiki indicates that the collective designation of what is good has become so low. The bar is so low that you can literally post an article vaguely approaching anything to do with the anomalous, with the writing project, and as long as it has the word milk in it, you'll get praise from people like we saw +1 milk, other Neo-Law Foundation authors. I think Plague PJP shows up here again to give it praise, but just sort of like NPC level bot that kind of reduces the whole project and everything that it's supposed to be doing here into basically a Twitter thread. So this is kind of where we are for the SCP Wiki. It's partially why I go through all the articles, just to kind of make sure that this is actually true. This is actually where we are. articles like this, you can watch the bar lower as you're reading it. That's kind of what happens in this. It's just unfortunately a joke. I like this article. I just don't understand, and maybe somebody can explain it to me. But if you just throw a J on it, this is brilliant. But if you don't, it just totally vacuums the entirety of this into a you think you're something special kind of stuff, and it's just, I don't know. It kind of comes off as a little punkish. Maybe that's just me being old, but this is kind of sad to see at the same time. There's a whole bunch of people these days writing for the wiki who don't really either care or understand, that there was a whole part of the wiki dedicated to this kind of stuff so that you could do this, and so that the wiki wouldn't have to lower its standards to let you in. Sorry. So I think we already did this one, but yeah, actively lowering the bar for sure. I'm happy it doesn't have a higher rating than it does. I mean, that's still a pretty healthy rating, but it could be worse. But this article is it's chlamydia. This article is chlamydia. All right, SCP-6290. Man, you hear that pause in the music? I love this backing track. It just sits there and does nothing for like 10 seconds, though. No bueno. All right, so I'm not going to go really into this article a whole bunch. I can't remember which one I thought about this one. It's either I didn't finish it or it's meh. But this is the corpse of a Caucasian male. It's approximately 75 years old. It's basically dressed in a clown suit. This version of it basically has the anomaly as a dead guy who's anomalous because its clown costume remains in pristine condition, which is a little odd. So like the guy died and he's decomposing, but there's a clown costume that the person wore in life that doesn't decompose, and so that's what the anomaly is. But of course, the whole thing is a unit of the anomaly. It's a Caucasian male who's approximately 75 years old at the time of death, and in an advanced state of composition. And then, of course, the whole structure of the article is such that we get very quickly the idea that this is an outdated, this is the most recent, and that we should go back and find the outdated one. And this is a little interesting because usually when you see this sort of offset tactic used, it's the opposite, where you've just read an outdated file, and of course that's the author's way to sort of throw some misdirection in and sort of do some switcheroo kind of stuff. So this one is kind of interesting in that way structurally. It's the opposite. You're reading the most recent. Would you like to go back and read the old one? So you're kind of like, I guess. So this one's a little different. Obviously, it gives us an image that probably the Foundation didn't take, but that's okay. And it goes into a lot more detail. So as opposed to this corpse, it goes into what the person is doing. This clown likes to show up in hospitals, and it's sort of like a Patch Adams who's not talented, and who's kind of like a bum, and maybe an alcoholic too. Maybe homeless. You just don't know. And so the old version of this article goes into a lot more detail about this. I don't really know why there's an updated version in this way. I mean, we could just have that as a addendum, like, hey, this is all still true, but the anomaly died. I don't know why we have two articles here in that way. I don't think it does a very good job of explaining itself in that regard. But this second portion at least exists so that we can have sample performances from this clown. And so we basically go to various medical centers. We go to basically, these are all kids. It's kind of like pediatric, palliative care situations. For example, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is not a fun thing. And we basically get, we basically are put into the room while this clown character performs these acts, which are admittedly bad. The author does, say that these are bad. But I don't think that being aware that these performances are bad makes listening to them or sitting through them any better. It's almost like a photographer saying that they're going to be taking a picture of a bad drawing, and that's great. I mean, it's what you wanted, but the picture is still just as bad as the bad drawing that you took the picture of. Okay, that's kind of what we get here. So it's like a bad performance, and the SCP has this sort of like cartoonized personality where the the kid begins to cry because the performance isn't very good, and obviously there's this very creepy homeless man who probably smells of alcohol, and who probably still has some sort of chip or Cheeto stuck all in its beard, spittling that out left and right as they try to make bad jokes. And the SCP responds by saying things like, "Oh, quit whining, you little twerp. At least you get to die." And so this is kind of the philosophical crux of the article, where all the clown wants to do is die. So it's like this tragic clown trope that's sort of like recolored and contexturized slightly. The character's name is Mr. Bubbles, which doesn't play well. It just feels very low-hanging fruit, almost like it's got some rot on it because it's been sitting on the ground for a little too long before the author picked it up. And gives a little bit of the backstory here. Just all in all, I mean, even on the old version, but certainly this one here. Let me take that back. These containment procedures are highly tailored to the anomaly here, which is nice. But the first ones we get are Lego conprox, which means that they're not really specific to the article. They're sort of just grabbed from a random pile of sentences that can be stuck together like Legos. Don't really have to do with one another or with anything that follows. I think there's pretty bad clinical tone. There's pretty bad grammar appearances here. Let's just show you one example. Despite the SCP state of decay, aforementioned clown costume remains in pristine condition. You're probably missing the word "the." And I'm not a fan of the word aforementioned. It's like a $10 word that people just kind of throw in there because they think it sounds funny. You could say, despite the state of decay, the costume remains in pristine condition. That would be way better of a clinical flow to the sentence. So it just lack of polish all over the article, kind of like that. And then once again we get to the transcription of these performances, because it's so bad and the article knows it's so bad, I can't tell if the author is trying to be funny with how bad the performance is or what. Like I said, it kind of just comes off as bad. So it's sort of a transitive property of the source material being bad, and it kind of makes the article bad too, unfortunately. The end also kind of leaves me with this kind of vague sense of wondering whether or not a target was hit by the author. It sort of just ends on this moment that is kind of supposed to be, I guess it's supposed to be funny. Let's just read this. Eager, I'm sick and tired of it. I want to be done with it. I only have 3,000 orders before I can retire and go back to my wife and kids. And the doctor says, "Wife and kids?" And Mr. Bubbles, why did I say that? I don't know if it's supposed to be funny or something. I don't really understand the ending like that. And then what complicates this is that it's not really the ending, is it? Because once again, the whole structure of this is sort of inverted and standing on its head, where this is the most recent revision. So I guess this is the ending, kinda. There's a little bit of confusion and dissonance in the structural flow of this, because it makes this interesting kind of presentation of itself. So if the end is supposed to be funny or revealing or something, I missed that one. I'm not really sure what this is supposed to be saying here at the end. So I think there's some replay value once you get to the end of the progression by this page. You maybe can go back and enjoy some replay value here. But once again, just like I said earlier, I'm kind of left just wondering why this updated version exists at all. I don't really know. I don't think it does a good job of justifying itself. And then, not that this is the end all be all for articles. You don't necessarily have to. This is not necessarily a deal breaker or a sinker, but when you have just a title that's just an unimaginative title, it's basically the theme worded completely straight. There's no more, talented, I guess, creativity or thinking when it comes to the title. It's just played straight, just exactly what it is. I don't think that's not a good sign. Once again, doesn't necessarily have to be a bad sign, but it kind of just summarizes the lack of originality and creative potential that seems to exist or not exist with this article. So that was SCP 26290. I can't put it in the "so bad I didn't finish it" category, because I technically did finish it. I don't think it's bad/popular enough to be actively lowering the bar. I think it's basically right in the middle. So this is a pretty meh article. This is kind of at plus 22, I mean, that's kind of where the wiki is these days. It kind of thinks that this kind of stuff is pretty good, good enough to be there, which I disagree with, obviously. But, so as far as the standards of the SCP Wiki are concerned, this is an average article. It's about what you expect to get. All right. SCP 6265. Let's hit this. 6265. Almost done here. Looks like we have like 4 or 5 more. All right. This one is basically a massive underground facility located, beneath a forest, and it has something to do with the old lore of Camelot from the 5th and 6th centuries. And it has this -1 who is a person, a female figure who is given, Guinevere obviously is a very well-known figure in the Camelot lore, and so this person is here, and basically is sort of the heart and soul of this facility, this underground facility. And it turns out that this facility is basically, as it says here, according to Guinevere, this SCP was constructed as a production facility for genetically engineered human beings by the Camelot monarchy. So we automatically tell that we're getting an anomaly that the author, is pretty advanced with. I mean, to take something like that and to give it such a modern day scientific sort of spin is automatically interesting. So this is very sophisticated anomaly construction already at this point. And so basically the rest of the article is all interviews with this Guinevere-1, and they talk about various things. There's a lot of cross links. This one's to the Church of the Broken God. And so that basically becomes a theme of this, where Camelot not only is given the sort of modern day scientific sort of sci-fi slant, but also ties into the Church of the Broken God. Essentially, it's sort of meshing King Arthur and Makane. I know I'm saying that deity wrong. Sorry. They sort of mesh those two things as sort of like the penultimate, not the penultimate, but the ultimate version of this lore's sort of masculinity, and sort of uses that as a linchpin to sort of staple together these two sets of lore, this Camelot and this Church of the Broken God. So it's an interesting sort of insertion point. It's an interesting sort of overlap that the author explores here, and does really effectively tie in this sort of science fiction slant. Basically, what's happening here is this genetic engineering is attempting to create this perfect version of King Arthur, who the article sort of hints might also be Makane too, as well. And so it sort of tries to give this very retrospective vibe to what is a futuristic posture in technology in this GOI. So this article is really complex. It's a very interesting piece. I think it's got a lot of technique in it. The artist who's making this article knows the finer points of the technicality of the genre. Like if this were a drawing, the artist would have a very good grip of shading or things like this, lighting, like very technically gifted stuff that's in this. I wanted to guess the author of this because of this word right here. Does anybody know who I think of when I see the word massive in it, in the first sentence of the description? Anybody? I thought it was DJ Cactus, because I don't know if you noticed this. DJ Cactus has a tendency, and really others who try to emulate DJ Cactus, Rounder House does this somewhat. The word massive is almost always in the first description, first sentence of the description. A lot of DJ Cactus articles deal with massive things, if you think about it. In fact, it's so much so that me and Harmony have joked around, kind of half joking, honestly, about trying to formalize a school of composition called colossal containment fiction, where you have people who basically rely on large scale, massive scale sort of entities in order to sort of act as, auto interest for the reader, which is a good technique, honestly. I'm certainly susceptible to that. I love reading about very tall, very big things. But I thought this was DJ Cactus. I wanted to bet. I was going to bet like maybe, $10. because of this word. Because anytime DJ Cactus writes an article about a large thing, it is always described as massive. There's a lot of synonyms you could use, but he never does. Don't know if you noticed. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And it usually always shows up in the first sentence of the description. So I thought this was DJ Cactus. It's not. So we'll get to the author in just a second, but I thought that was kind of a funny thing to notice right off the bat there. So I think as sophisticated, obviously, as this anomaly is, as the design of this anomaly and how the author really finds ways to sort of cog them in with one another very seamlessly, I also kind of can't help but feel it's a little amateurish, almost like a fanfic fantasy crossover that somebody just really wanted to see and sort of like made happen because it's really as deep or as shallow as that idea. It was just, I want to make the Church of the Broken God and Camelot because I happen to be reading Camelot at this time in my life, and here's the Church of the Broken God, and let's just see what happens when we throw them into a blender together. And so, I think there's the charm of it. If you're a big fan of this kind of stuff, obviously it carries probably a little more momentum for you. Personally, I felt like it was a little ham-fisted. I felt like it was just a little forced of a juxtaposition. And, once again, kudos to the author for finding that nice moment, that nice linchpin moment where you can staple those two things together, that being, King Arthur and Makane as sort of the culmination of the lore in a lot of ways that people are sort of impending the realization of. But it's just very fortuitous in a lot of ways. For example, this -1, this Guinevere, seems cool. I like the image here of this female figure sort of at the center of this giant mechanical bioengineered womb. I think that's really cool. But it turns out really to be functionally made into an exposition machine. So like every single one of these interviews basically were just dropped, just full explanations of everything as needed directly for the Foundation. So it feels like just a lot of talking and not a lot of anything else happening. The end once again meshes these two deity figures as sort of these impending sort of culminations. And it's also just kind of fortuitous. I mean, this happens like in real time. So let me just skip to the end here so I can show you. We get a lot of different characters. It's almost like a who's who cast. A lot of cameos of Camelot kind of stuff. And then this -1 Guinevere just expounds, does a lot of exposition on every single one. And then the end, which is really the escalation point where the article has to finally do something. It feels kind of lazy, like it's just sitting in the same spot the whole time you're reading the article until the end, where Guinevere is like, oh, hey, we basically got it. Oh, my king, here's my king. The mission is complete. The whole point of this genetic thing is realized. We got it. We hit the jackpot. Here he is. Here's King Arthur and Makane, coming up. And this is happening, as an addendum, right? I mean, so this is happening, between the time the Foundation met this thing and now. So the Foundation, even though this thing has been around since the 5th century, the Foundation came across it just at the right time, shortly after it was discovered, I guess, where it just so happened that the climax of this whole thing, centuries in the works, happens when the Foundation shows up so that they can watch it happen. And so it just feels like it's a little convenient. It almost makes me want to chuckle, which really kind of takes me out of the whole experience. So, it's just very fortuitous that the Foundation has discovered this anomaly just in time for this to happen. It's almost like the plot was waiting on the Foundation to show up so that they could document this and see it. So the ending too, which is like, once again, it's like, here he is. The next specimen is King Arthur. It's perfect. The status of it is growing, and there's this magnificent tag here. This really isn't a real departure. If you think about the lore that we all know of the Church of the Broken God, it's not even a reimagining from the stock Church of the Broken God lore. This is literally what the whole lore is. I mean, it's really the spear point, the tip of the whole lore already as it exists. The only difference between here is that it's King Arthur now too. There's no real departure here from just what already exists on the SCP Wiki, just kind of sitting there in the Church of the Broken God lore. So that makes this endpoint rather unexciting for me. It's kind of an anticlimax, and almost when you think about it structurally, it's kind of expected. It's almost like where else could it have gone? And so I think that just it's a pretty lumbering, pretty cumbersome structural performance by the author. And then I don't know if you've noticed without me pointing it out, but we have this same thing at the end here. Again, we have a non-statement. This is the whimper. This is how you whimper your way out of an article. That if you remove this statement, it would have ended a lot better. This is a much better ending. We don't need to be told that the observation is ongoing. That's obvious. This statement doesn't say anything, and the article is better if you remove it. Same as every other instance of this riding off into the sunset trope that people don't really think about what they're doing. So, it turns out that this is not DJ Cactus. This is, again, Tanhoney, another article by Tanhoney. This is the second one this week, and probably 4 in the last 2 weeks. So it just goes to show you that you can be the best and still make technical errors like this that make it very clear that you haven't really thought about, I think, very deeply, your art in a detailed way, as someone who is of this caliber should be thinking about their art in this detailed of a way. And it also goes to show you that it's a good thing, I think, that we don't know who wrote this article, because I think the temptation would be that if you saw that Tanhoney wrote this, and I admit that I would be this way too. I mean, I'm certainly not above these things, which is why I like to see when there is no author that is ruining the sort of professional and scientific blinded assessment of an article, is because the temptation is that when you see someone's name, you say to yourself, oh, this is good, or, oh, I should read this one because it's by this author. And as is the case with this article, this is dramatically less talented. This is a much, much worse article than the other ones that we've seen from Tanhoney. The one that we just looked at about the row, about the afterlife. The one about crucifying frogs from last week. This one is markedly lower quality than those other ones, just from a technical standpoint. And you can think subjectively whatever you want to about it. That's fine, obviously. But just from a technical standpoint, this is a much less polished, a much lower budget article than the other ones that we've seen Tanhoney write. So it's a good thing we didn't know Tanhoney was writing this whole time. I certainly would not have put this to Tanhoney's level of capability, but that's the temptation, because when you have someone's name there, you really. It's the temptation. It's the human brain that really tries. I mean, it's a heuristic. It wants to do it for efficiency's sake. It's nothing wrong with doing it. But, it's important to resist that, particularly if you want to try to make your writing the best that it can be. That means reading the best you can read as well. And, it's a matter of just denying yourself the convenience so that you can put more work into it. That's really what the brain is trying to not do. It doesn't want to do all this work. It wants to skip the work. It wants to rely on the author name so that you can skip the work. So you can just think that it's good and upvote it and move on. When in reality, this is really, pretty average of an article. So this is SCP 6265. I'm going to put it in the meh category. Would you have thought that I would have put it there if you knew it was Tanhoney beforehand? I don't know, but that's the point, is that we don't have to think about that since we read the whole thing without knowing who the author is. So anyway, we don't have to look at the comments. It kind of reinforces what I'm trying to preach to you, which is that a lot of people in here are very sort of droolingly. I don't want to say something inappropriate, but they're drooling all over Tanhoney in a particular way in this article, which is fine. Once again, there's plenty of room for subjectivity here, but it's just not nearly up to the caliber of Tanhoney at his best. So I think this is a pretty meh article. I mean, certainly read it if you've got time. It's certainly interesting. If you like this subject matter, this is going to be right up your alley. It's very competently written. Like I said, this is technically a gifted article by every measure, I think, except structurally. But, is it a good article? I don't think so. All right. I say that like I could do a lot better. Maybe I can. I write all the time. Have you read my stuff? I don't know. Probably a better critic than I am a writer. I'll probably give you that. All right, SCP-6533. What is this one? As my computer tries to load. Cool. So I've talked about this a lot. Don't have to talk about it again. But basically, this rainbow ACS variant is kind of like putting Walter White into a pride jacket in the middle of an episode because it was filmed in June. Which is once again making concessions to things outside of the art form that probably fit better somewhere else. There's no in-universe justification for this period, and that's a real shame. But obviously, I'm not allowed to say that because obviously, if I don't feel exactly the same way, then apparently I'm an evil person. So I personally don't like this. I think it's fine if you want to put it up here. I think the immersion starts basically where the article starts. So, if it was up to me, the rating module wouldn't be there either for the same reason. So that's really the same argument. It's nothing really against these colors. I don't want you to think I'm a bad person or anything like that. It just has everything to do with being in character. I'm pro LGBTQ. I am LGBTQ, by the way. As cool as it would be to see it all over the place, when I'm watching episodes of Breaking Bad, probably don't want to see Walter White wearing it, even though it's a good message. Let's just save it for not in the episode. So I don't know what this thing is doing here. Doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's just that. Let's move on. This is a future sort of article. You can kind of tell the ad astra per aspera. Great little design here. I love the nebula clouds. It looks great. I love the. It's kind of like somewhere between orange and yellow. I just love that color. So cool. It's like a mob, got a peach kind of thing. But this is a future article that is set with some interesting post-apocalyptic framing regarding birds. So you may have gotten that hint from the images. This one being a mechanical bird. Looks like it's made out of metal. So it's an anomaly that unpredictably and exclusively affects humanoid spacecraft with no known concrete cause or pattern. Affected vehicles will begin to travel will begin to travel autonomously, disregarding any orders by its operators. After this period, the ship will begin to bend, tear, and crush itself so that it can reshape its body into some class of bird. And so this article makes good use of interesting framing devices. So like it basically casts birds as totally extinct, which I always am a huge fan of. Like when you fuck with like the reality behind the document, like that's kind of still in universe. It's still kind of in character. Captain Kirby does this really well with that article about a knife that kills people, and like the whole thing is that way because the in character background setting is fucked with. So this kind of does that. Obviously not as good. This kind of does that with birds, to where it's like, oh hey, birds are extinct. Wouldn't you know it? So this is a pretty dense article, pretty long. You've got a lot of table work going on here with, I can't imagine how this looks on mobile. I don't want to know. But yeah, a lot of interviews going on here. Some collapsibles, some addendums at the end here with a new file thing that does a lot of exposition. Kind of looks like it kind of reminds me of Admonition a little bit, just the way it's set up. Obviously the colors and the subject matter are totally different, but yeah, I mean, it's a good looking article, but as I read through this, I can't help but see that it makes some pretty cringe decisions. Here's a really obvious one. So this is a transcript right here, this interview transcript, and the SCP instances, obviously these are birds, these are mechanical birds, that are sort of like cast as these things that need to come back and avenge actual birds by like wholesale attacking humans, so they basically want revenge, on the death of their species, and obviously blame humans because humans bad, because humans apparently are responsible for the death of so many species when, obviously nature itself has killed 99.9999% of species that have ever lived and died. But anyway, these birds, in a motion of pretty unthoughtful characterization, decide that all humans should be attacked and killed and basically gotten their comeuppance because they had a say in birds going extinct in this dystopian future. And so the author decides that while this transcript is happening, once again, if we're thinking in character here from the perspective of the Foundation, let me get a sip of this forbidden drink. Thank you, Spindrift, for sponsoring this. Hope you guys can see that. Spindrift, orange mango. Love it. Yeah, so the the author has decided to include the vocalization of these mechanical birds rock, like rock, like over and over again, like several times. I mean, if I don't know, there's no words for this. Like I can't. I'm sorry. Like this doesn't make any sense. I have no idea why someone would. Never mind. And then once again, going back to something we already talked about on this stream, if I had a nickel for every time someone wrote an animal-based anomaly that has all caps messages for the Foundation regarding the collapse and destruction of their civilization and species, and who is sapient and who can speak, I'd be rich and I could just retire and just do this every day, for the fuck of it. The whole idea behind this anomaly, I think, is quite stale. It's really nothing new and exciting at all. Once again, the characterization given to the birds here is remarkably shallow and mild. It's intent on killing all humans because they caused or at least didn't prevent the demise of all birds. So, in other words, these birds are kind of bigoted, and that's supposed to be like a character. That's like the character of these birds in this article. So, I don't know. It's not really satisfying. Like, give me something better than that. Come on. The article, I think, escalates very quickly beyond its own gravity, getting a bit ridiculous in the last log in order to stuff the idea filled with action sequences, which is kind of what we get here, and kind of beyond. There's more pseudoscientific stuff. But, this decommissioning log is a good example of just trying to stuff in a bunch of action to kind of get this article, I guess, a little more interesting, because it's not working with much, to be honest with you. This article also, this is another one that I included in my blog post. It also ends the same way that the last one did. This is 2 in a row. That's happened a couple times this month, where we have these non-ending statements that don't mean anything. This is the right off into the sunset again, the non-ending, the whimper. Whereas if you remove this last sentence, it doesn't really add anything, and if you take it away, you don't really lose anything. It's just a way to make the ending worse. This article does that too, without thinking about it, obviously. So, this article, I think, it was so unengaging for me that it goes in the category of so bad I didn't finish it. Even though I did read most of it, I found myself skimming it, sort of desperately trying to get to the end because, once again, eating a jar of pickles, right? How many pickles do you need to eat in that jar before you're okay with not finishing it, and still being secure in your assessment of the product? There was a comment here. Birds in space, need I say more? Yeah, you kind of do need to say more, and that's kind of my point. Birds in space shouldn't be enough to get you an upvote on the wiki. It's not quite as bad as milk, but yeah, you do need to say more. So unfortunately, Dr. Apricus here is communicating to us how low the standards of the wiki have gotten, how low the bar is. Basically, if you write about birds in space, you're good. You're good to go. That's not totally true. Obviously, I'm being overly simplistic for the sake of being an asshole, but it's really not that far off from the truth, is it? All right, just 3 more. Chugging right along. SCP-6811. See what we got here. Okay, so full disclosure, the author tells us who they are immediately. So I have to do a full disclosure because I'd rather do this blinded. But now there's a person who's associated with this article before I even read a word of it. And I'm a human, and so it probably is good for you to know how this can potentially affect my review of this article. So to that end, we'll do a full disclosure. So what is my full disclosure with Jay Dune? Well, I'm not really a fan of Jay Dune. I certainly think Jay Dune is talented, technically very gifted author, can write some incredibly good things, but who routinely chooses to do with that talent some pretty sad things to watch happen over and over and over again, like it's some sort of hell that some sort of Olympian god has forced onto Jay Dune, who's blessed with great ideas, but who often takes them in very silly directions that end up being kind of reason to question whether or not Jay Dune is good of a writer to me. But having said that, I have read a lot of Jay Dune stuff that's really fucking good. So, it's kind of just a toss-up. It's either going to be kind of cringy or really, really, really fucking good. So, This, unfortunately, I'll go ahead and tell you is actually, I don't know if I didn't finish this article, so it's so bad that I didn't finish it. So this is going to go into so bad I didn't finish it category. I think I could have put it in the actively lowering the bar, but it just got that bad. Like I didn't finish this article, and I'll tell you exactly why. So I love the premise. Once again, this is kind of what JDune does. I love the premise. It's a great idea. This is a gadfly that bugs the O5 Council, so it's kind of a pun. I mean, it's just a great idea to take a very funny, simple scene and kind of make an article out of it. I even don't mind taking a fly and putting it with the O5s. Typically, once again, just to go back to Neo Law Foundation, which of course is defined by its adherents, right? Any school of composition, any school of artistry is defined by the people who participate in that school. And so, of course, Rounder House, JDune, Plague, PJP, the Yurt Boys, BOIS, all those guys are involved in Neo Law Foundation pretty unabashedly. So, one of the characteristics you see of Neo Law Foundation is taking the O5 Council and making them really, really dumb. And the reason it does this is because obviously it's interested in subverting as much as it possibly can, including the foundational principles and ideals and and philosophical pinnings of the genre. And so what it does is take something like the O5, and because they're supposed to be competent, it apparently makes it funnier when they're really, really dumb. And so that's a go-to move for the Neo Law Foundation crew. And so, I started to get a little worried when I saw that here, but I don't even mind it here because I think, something as innocuous as a fly, flying around, that's a really great thing to recruit the O5 for in a humorous fashion. I mean, because it's not making them dumb, right? It's just kind of putting them in the everyday human situation of being annoyed by a fly. So, if you can avoid making the Foundation dumb, you probably will avoid Neo Law Foundation. Just an FYI. But having said that, we do immediately run into some problems. So the first big problem is that this is a declassified, essentially documents level 1 unrestricted, and it's neutralized. So what's the problem there? Well, the problem is that the whole article is filled with transcriptions of O5 council members discussing things. And in the discussion, we can see them talking about things, certain things that you would think should still be covert, like, for example, in this first paragraph here, it talks about trying to normalize the consumption of horse meat, just stuff that, like dishonestly. So it's stuff that maybe shouldn't be kind of like common knowledge. But this is, as you can see, a wrinkle that the author doesn't care about or thought about and decided to not care about, right? So that they can do this. That's pretty Neo Law Foundation, just FYI. So they should be talking about things that are probably tucked behind the classification or a credential lock. The author, I think, kind of confuses the fact that this is a neutralized anomaly with the fact that nothing in here is still sensitive, which is not necessarily true. And so we kind of run into that immediately. The discussion that the O5s are having, in various places are clearly things that should be protected information still, even though this anomaly is neutralized. So there's really the article doesn't really make eye contact with that fact. It doesn't really try to deal with that. It just tries to ignore it so that it can continue. So is that lazy writing? Yeah, if you ask me, it is. The author just zips past that, kind of like an annoying fly, right? Just right past these things. Additionally, and this is probably the most glaring structural and cosmetic blemish of this article. It's almost like a pimple right in the nose, tip of the nose there. But it's very odd that this is given a designation number when it really hasn't been shown at all at any point in the article to be anything other than just a fly, particularly by the end of the description. So I think this would have been a good idea for you to use the object class anomaly and then have it crossed out, because it's, once again, as we talked about earlier in this stream, it's kind of supposed to be like the purpose of that, where it's kind of like this thing that's barely anomalous, like maybe not even at all, and you can kind of include that information in the format, which is a really clever move, by the way. It's really working the genre well because it's supposed to be kind of tied. Everything's supposed to be kind of tied to the format. But the author doesn't do that. I don't know if it's because the author doesn't think of that, or if they just, once again, don't care. I mean, we've got plenty of evidence that this author does not really care about the things that make this genre itself. Is perfectly willing to bend those if it gets more laughs or upvotes or things like this. But it just strikes me as very odd and inexplicable that this is given all the trouble of a designation that is eventually neutralized, by the way, when there is not even the slightest hint of any indication anywhere in here that it is not just a fly. In fact, the article actually states this explicitly and says it's otherwise it is indistinguishable from ordinary flies. And so as you read this article, it sort of gives you somewhat of an idea of how this thing could have been designated as an SCP, even though it was just a fly. But that itself is kind of a joke. It's kind of a one-liner that's kind of dropped, and falls by the wayside. So, here we are again with this author. Routinely doesn't, I think, understand the finer points, the finer details of this writing, of the style of writing. You kind of have to, at some point, ask yourself, does he not care or does he not see these things? And it doesn't really matter the answer because it's really indistinguishable. It doesn't matter which one it is. As you read through this, I mean, it goes in exactly the direction that you probably think it will, which it kind of gets just ridiculously slapstick. It's taken straight out of a really bad cartoon scene where this fly is just this inordinately inconveniencing thing that causes just tremendous cascades of hilarity, just like a conga line of unfortunate events stacked on top of one another, where somehow, the fly is still buzzing and everybody else is in a big pile and they're all beat up on one another. That's basically what happens here. The article does rely on and dip heavily into some slapstick humor and just bad jokes that should exist in a newspaper comic. Really senseless scene construction that's just way too dumb for its own good. Situations that we would never see these characters in. That this writing is not meant for the Foundation. It's not meant for the SCP Wiki. This is someone else's work that has decided to invade the SCP Wiki like a weed. And of course, like a weed, it ends up growing, probably more than it should relative to the finer parts of the garden. In fact, the whole wiki, I think, is probably basically something that was once a beautiful garden bed that is now kind of just a bunch of weeds for the most part. Not to say there can't be pretty wildflowers in there as well. But typical of Neolol Foundation, of course, we have cartoon levels of attempted humor. Again, every character that you read in a Neolol Foundation article can be spoken by the abstract, floating, haunting figure of Star-Lord from the Marvel Universe, from Guardians of the Galaxy. Basically, every character, there's no differentiation of characterization in Neolol Foundation articles. Every single one of them is written as if it was Star-Lord saying the line. And you can actually read Neolol Foundation articles this way. You can imagine Star-Lord, and every line that you read fits perfectly. So, that is to say, this is characteristic and typical shallow characterization. So the entirety of the Foundation's competency and character is distorted in this article in order to, in order for the author to try to be funny. I guess the reception of this article is basically just if you think it's funny, which once again kind of sounds like a J, doesn't it? Kind of sounds like a J, but it's not. So here's one line that I think is probably pretty telling. It kind of highlights what I'm trying to say pretty well for me, does my job for me. Here's 0512. 5. You're acting very silly right now, and as a member of the Overseer Council, you should know that silliness is strictly forbidden. They don't like it when we act silly. And you wouldn't want to upset your masters, now would you? So clearly, once again, just like Plague PJP, the author is pretty aware of themselves as peak Neolol Foundation, and it seems like they're getting that fact is getting to the author, I would say. To answer the point that the author kind of pokes through the fourth wall here, there's a difference between silliness and incompetence. That's really something we already said. That these people who are really the purveyors and the people who are pushing the school of composition forward don't seem to be understanding the nuance of. There's definitely a difference between being silly and being incompetent. This article is not silly. This article is just plain incompetence, plain dumb writing from a writer who I'm starting to think has a tough time making intelligent characters. So it used to be the case that I thought that Neo-Law Foundation authors were competent, but decided to go with really dumb characterization and really shallow scene construction because they wanted to get upvotes, and this was sort of positively reinforced to them in that process. But it's articles like this that make me actually kind of second guess that and wonder if these people like Jay Dune, just how good they are, just how capable they are of writing a intelligent character, which is not everything. Okay, I'm not trying to say that intelligence is like the most important quality of anybody. It's just that when you have something like the Foundation, it's probably a good idea to try to make them intelligent. The analogy I would give is Darth Vader. If you write Darth Vader as an idiot, he's not Darth Vader anymore, because the whole character, the whole imposing, presence of something like Darth Vader is because Darth Vader is quite competent. If Darth Vader is suddenly an idiot, you're really not dealing with Darth Vader anymore, and you're really not going to be able to do the character justice. Okay, so if you wrote Darth Vader as an idiot, you by definition would not be respecting the character, right? And so that's kind of what I see in this. These people, they are more than happy to make idiots out of people like the O5 Council, so that they can have a laugh, do it for the lulz kind of thing. Anyways, so yeah, it's not just to answer the question. It's not that people in the O5 Council can't act silly. That's not true. It's that they shouldn't be idiots. Okay. There is a difference between those two things, and I'll just let you work that out in your own time. Okay. At some point, I think hopefully you'll understand that. Let me just put up one more example. Just look at this quote that I selected and think O5 Council members of the most secretive and dire organization on the planet. O5 stands at the head of the table. He has lathered himself in honey and holds 2 salt guns. On his waist is a belt containing multiple fly swatters, jars of salt, and what appears to be an authentic firearm. His appearance is haggard with dark circles under his eyes. So, I mean, we're literally at Cartoon Network here right now. He occasionally twitches. So there you go. The meeting room is outfitted with multiple fly traps, and it buzzes overhead. So, you cannot write this paragraph and maintain the character of the O5 Council. Those two things are dichotomous. Can't do it. So it was at this point that I was more than happy to stop reading this article. I would be happy to put it in this category of actively lowering the bar. I hope you can see how this article actually does make the wiki's standards a lot worse. But I didn't finish it. It was just too bad. I just did not want to do it anymore, and it was such a bad. It's like trying to finish a plate that someone brought you at a restaurant. I just can't finish. I'm hungry, but I just can't finish this. I'm sorry. Send it back. So that's SCP-6811. I hate that. I'd rather talk about good articles. And unfortunately, that is really where we are with the SCP Wiki. This is kind of people love this shit. So, but once again, that's what I'm doing up here. All right, like I think that there's a whole group of people who should be more interested in, like actually treating the Foundation as a character well. You know what I mean? And I seem to be in the minority, but that's what I'm trying to do here. Is I'm trying to gather people who think like me, because I wish there was a place where I could read this kind of stuff and not have to wade through, 5 articles like that to get to something really good. That's just me. All right. I want my Darth Vader to be imposing and badass. All right, SCP-6861. So this, just really quickly, obviously, is a very, very short article. Really, in its essence, it's a pun article. It's also a retcon of Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth. It's a very silly article, but it does a very, very good job of containing that silliness in clinical tone. I'd really like to hold this article up as a great example of how you can be silly in the Foundation verse with Foundation characters and not dip to the level of a rejected Cartoon Network ripoff script. Okay. This is a good example of that. This is a very, very silly article. It's appropriately not a J. It shouldn't be a J. The last article should definitely have been a J. This one is not, because it takes very silly things and you can almost tell there's a person in universe trying to be as professional as possible with how absurd this content is, as opposed to the character of a previous article that we just looked at, where obviously the person behind the keyboard typing the document is having as absurd and as good of a time being as unprofessional as possible as the content is absurd. So this is just a really, really nice, concise article. Basically, it's about a Tyrannosaurus Rex who, by some sort of mimetic effect, made people think that it's a human. So I like this a lot. This is sort of an inversion of what I have come to see as a trope. Once again, instead of taking an animal and making them more human-like, you kind of take the same idea, but you do it in a totally different way. We don't have a sapient Tyrannosaurus Rex that we get an interview with. The author decides to go in that direction over there instead with the same basic ingredients. And so it's really refreshing. Wow, 100 in a few days, wherever. I mean, obviously, I think this is a little inflated. It is basically all about a pun that's just right here. Six Emperor Tyrannosaurus. That got me. A little bit of a pun. So anyway, it's quick, it's charming, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It does exactly what it wants to do, and it's very, very sly about it, and does a good job. And has some quirky moments that work. And once again, it does so because it does not compromise with the character of the Foundation or clinical tone in order to do that. It's just a nice little entry. So I kind of want to see who did this. I can't remember. Giare, I guess. I think we saw one article from this person previously, but you just never know who's going to write that certified banger next. And this week it was this guy, or person, excuse me. So that was SCP-6861. I would put this in Array of Hope. I think it's definitely better than Meh. I don't think it's like astoundingly good, but better than average. So it certainly is above average. And now we're at our very last article. So I want to thank you for joining. How long have we been doing this? Why are there 8 people watching me? This is fucking ridiculous. What the hell are you guys doing? It's Sunday night. I'm an old man. I don't have a life. I have 2 kids. And whatever free time I get, I'm happy with. I mean, I don't know what the hell y'all are doing. Anyway, it's 10:38. One person just left. They're like, fuck, I'm out of here. He's talking to me. 10:38. So we're almost done here. This has been a pretty long stream. How long have we been doing this? 3 hours and 40 minutes. Holy shit. This is a long one. I've been trying to make these things shorter, but my God. Very last article. SCP-6739. Let's hit that and we'll be done. There it is. I'm gonna go take a long sleep. I'm tired, man. Went to a wedding last night. You guys don't know this about me, but I can dance. Yeah, I'm an old man now. I still got the moves. I'm not gonna be a YouTube star or anything, but I have a good time at a wedding. I'll tell you that. All right. So this one is this one is highly conceptual article. This is SCP-6739. Highly conceptual. Before we get into anything, the author has announced themselves. So what is my relationship with Indy Heckfire? I don't have any relationship with this person. I've seen their name around. I don't really remember anything that they may have written. So, as far as author tells are concerned, kind of a blank slate. So that's nice. But yeah, this is a very highly conceptual article. It almost reminds me of unreality articles in that it takes, it sort of gestures towards an idea, it sort of gestures towards something that is here, but it doesn't quite get there, but it does so very intentionally, which means, this is very, very precise. There's a lot of precision in this article, quite a lot. So let's take a little look at it. So it's a designation given to an obvious non-visible specific absence located in the collective human noosphere, which seems to be mainly centralized and concentrated in the upper corner wall of the cafeteria. So this is one rare example where seems actually works, because we're dealing with like noospheric, gaps. We're dealing with noospheric inconsistencies. And so I think there may not be any better context in which to use seams or appears. So just it goes to show you that you can use these things well. There are situations wherein they're totally appropriate and they actually bolster the ideas that are being worked with as opposed to their usual casting. Usually they hinder that. So this is a very good example. I love the photo. I love that somebody just took a picture of the cafeteria corner up there. Yeah, I think the clinical tone gets a little clunky. It trips over itself just a little bit. So an obvious, non-visible, specific absence. I mean, that's three adjectives kind of piled on top of one another. There's got to be a better way to make that flow just a little more smoothly. But yeah, so anybody perceiving this corner will become entirely convinced that something was once previously located there. And so the rest of the article goes, it kind of tips its hat towards the Department of Serialistics, which of course is, kind of an outgrowth of just the high levels of absurdity we see in the SCP Wiki these days. And I think actually, I'll say one more thing about Neo-Law Foundation. I know people are tired of hearing me say that word over and over again. But I do think that the Department of Serialistics and this whole trend that we're seeing of surreality on the wiki is something good that came out of Neo-Law Foundation. So I think that I like surrealistic portraits like this. This ends up being a surrealistic portrait of some kind of small animal that lives in corners that you might already know what it is. But anyway, so I think that even the worst things can have good things come out of them, and so that's one of those things, in my opinion. But so the rest of the article basically very carefully, and once again with a lot of precision, really sort of dances conceptually around what this might be. The author is really, really good at dropping down just the exact hints that you need at the right places to get you basically where they want you to go to the end of this article. So, there's a couple things that I think are not good. So first example is the object class anomalous here. We just talked about how this object class literally and explicitly means that it's not important enough to have a numerical designation. Well, that's contradicted here. So we have to sort of reconcile that by putting this document in a very specific and strange place in the chronology of this database, where it was an anomalous item that wasn't really that anomalous, and now it's kind of had a little more gumption to it, and it's not quite updated in that fashion on the document. But to make that work and to kind of install that as headcanon, it's a lot of work just for this, and so I think the author has misused this. I think once again the only technically correct way to use this is if you have this as a struck through line and have something else maybe pending or something like that. So just wanted to shout that out. I think I'm applying that correctly. This is new information that I've had to learn over the last couple of weeks, but I'm pretty sure this is a technical error there. And there's also some grammar issues here too. Let's point these out. So it could use a little more polish. So research into the SCP seems to suggest that certain Foundation personnel that frequently visits, personnel is one of those words that some people take to be singular, some people take to be plural. But the way this sentence is constructed, it really feels like it should be visit. Visits seems wrong. And then footnote 2 is also quite a mess. I'm not sure what this is doing here. This is kind of a clover-looking thing. It's on the Apple keyboard. Not sure how you would pronounce that. Is it class clover agnostics? I don't really know. It seems, once again, is one of those moments where the author is just trying to have a lot of flair without a lot of, without the same measure of thought behind the decision, just for the sake of being cool. But yeah, footnote 2 is a total mess. Just way more confusing than it is informative, which somewhat fits with the themes here, but just comes off as a mistake. A non-chemical substance capable. There's a question mark in a parenthetical that's not hyphenated. It's just so strange. This is a really bad way to describe agnostics, by the way. There's a much more technically capable way of describing what that is. That footnote is a mess. Anyways, so we get this very nebulous story about a once alive concept that occupied this corner, this space here. And the testing logs, like I said, give us some vague tracings of what that could be, including an unreality anchor that I didn't know was capable of printing an image, but it is. And so here it is. So this kind of looks like something that you'd get out of DALL-E, DALL-E Mini or something like that. It kind of seems like it's procedurally generated. Doesn't really give a lot of detail. If there is something here that's supposed to be here, I'm missing it. I thought this was a cute little guy down here. I'm not really sure what that is, though. I think it's just me reading into some things, but I don't really know if this image does anything. So I mean, it's nice. It's nice to see. No context was given by the unreality anchor, but I thought it was pretty cool to have an unreality anchor that's printing an image. It's just kind of a cool little thing that I've never seen before. So it's not informative, but it's okay. It's okay. I think it's cool. And there's some internal personnel drama to spice up this the vast amounts of empty space that this article offers. The author, like I said, drops just enough subtlety in just the right spaces to basically get you to where they want you to be with regards to what was previously or still occupying this space in the corner up here. And then a couple just last little notes. The author has yet to actually correct this. The SCP-6XXX is still here on the footnote thing. On the, what do you call this? I can't remember what you call this thing. Crosswalk or something. I don't know. So yeah, it's a real interesting article. The author tells us, I guess, is bragging that they wrote and finished this in a day, polished and got feedback for the next day. I think that shows. I don't think in a flattering way. Like I said, there's a few tonal things in here, some grammatical rust on the tone, and I think even the idea probably could have used a little more finesse too. I mean, it's not bad. But I feel like there was a lot of meat left on this bone, so to speak. It feels a little unfinished. It feels a little hurried. But still, it's clever. It's puzzling. And the author, like I said, the most impressive thing about this article is the precision of the author. They know exactly where to put, the data that they want you to have without really force feeding it to the reader. So I think that alone makes this a success of an article. There's one comment in here that I thought was pretty good. This last one. This is a pretty solid article, but the use of seems to can irritate the audience, especially when used more than once. The Foundation shouldn't sound hesitant about these types of things. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that's usually a very, very good point. But this is why this is an art form and not a science. That's not always true. And I think this case is actually a good use of it because once again, we're dealing with these very, very almost completely dissolved concepts. And so I think there's no better way to sort of communicate that vagueness in this context, particularly than doing it that way. So I would say this last one is a ray of hope. I think it's really good on the whole, and it really could be a Department of Unreality, I think, in some ways. It just goes to show you that, a lot of these things can be sort of translated into other things. Department of Reality can be just sort of new spheric play. Pataphysics can be sort of reduced to just reality bending, honestly. Kind of just pick your preference kind of thing. But I think 33. This is a really healthy rating for this in a short amount of time that it's had. So, good job to the author once again. This is kind of the first impression that I've had for this author. So, looking forward to seeing more from this person. I think this is a really nice and satisfying, refreshing article. I think it's above average. So, good stuff. All right, so this is the spread that we have from this week. I'll probably just post this to the Twitter, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, only the smallest category are those that weight lift the whole standards of the wiki, and we get I think this is a pretty good week. This is how you kind of see that it's a pretty good week. I think that most of them are meh. That's always going to be the case. But we have more ones that are a little better than meh than the immediately inferior category. But we do have more articles that lowered the bar, lowered the standards of the wiki on the whole. So it's a net negative for the week, I think, unfortunately. But we do have some really great entries. These two, one of these would have been the selection for the week had we done config call-in today or SCP meta today. Anyways, so wow, thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. This has been a little longer than I like to go, but it's nice to be back. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for adapting to the scheduling conflicts. Like I said, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. I'm really pining for some regularity, so hopefully we'll get that back. The next time I'll be on here is Tuesday night, where we basically just like watch it, and sometimes I don't even say anything, so that's fun. Very laid back. We'll probably pick up a podcast. If you got any recommendations for what we should listen to, why not? Tell me what you want to see. Maybe it'll be good enough. I don't know. We just did the To Staffer and Lux podcast episode 1 last week. That was really good. I like that quite a lot. We'll probably come back to them later. Maybe we'll do another Yurt cast. What do you think about that? That really got some people. They really thought that was funny. So maybe we'll do another episode of that. It was funny about the Yurt cast is that it hadn't done a new episode in like, what is it, like 8 months, and then I watched one on this and like reacted to it, and of course that got Rounderhouse's attention. Seemed to be pretty excited that I'd done that, and then like the next week a new episode came out. So you're welcome. Yeah. Anyways, this has been a lot of fun. I love doing this. I love reading containment fiction. It's the best genre that's ever existed, and it's not easy. So I'm here to remind you of that. And check it out. Check out the rest of the week. Tuesday, Thursday night, when we have our fun, just hang out, relax, and react to that stuff. Yeah, that's about it. We'll try to do this on Friday, which is our usual night to do that, 7:30 p.m. CST. Probably get some help again. It's just a lot to do on my own now that I have so much more responsibilities to head to again. But yeah, I really appreciate y'all showing up. I'm glad that this is a service to people, and I hope you learned something. It really is what this is all about. Hopefully we get things in focus that you've never thought about before, and that can help you write better in this genre, because it's really unique, and I think we should be leaning into the strengths of the genre. So this has been SCP CRNP, aka Lack of Lepers. I appreciate it. Y'all have a great few days, and I'll see you again soon. Take it easy. And thank you to Spindrift for the orange mango. Pretty good.